Devil, my friend,
Oh, yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. You can sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Oh yeah.
Coney Island
Burn into fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampireanddevil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampireanddevil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
Ah, there, Fangs and Infernos. You know that the devil and I love to talk about our movies in bulk, whether it be directors, writers, things of that sort. We had such a great time discussing franchises that we felt the need to do it all again. So we're going to talk a little bit about witches and warlocks and pornography, and top it off, devil, with a little bit of murder.
Oh yeah, you know what I mean? It's like we're gonna talk about witches, bitches, stitches, and all kinds of goody ooey good stuff, as we pick up, Warlock, the Warlock trilogy of Warlock 1, 2, and 3 versus, what's been considered, I don't know, there's so many different names. You can call it the X trilogy, you can call it the Maxine trilogy, you can call it the Ty West trilogy. But it's the 3 movies that are all togetherness with, the beginning of X, the prequel of Pearl, and then the sequel of Maxine. But a lot of people call it the X Factor or the X, trilogy or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. We're going to talk about all three of those, and we're going to talk a little bit about Warlock and our dearly departed Julian Sands that we both have loved. Talk
Yes.
about him and the good stuff, the bad stuff. And all the good things in between. Some things have some good, better stuff, and some stuff have some other stuff. But the one thing that each one of these movies has evil shit and lots of nudity.
Absolutely, my friend. Yeah, Julian is 100% on my Mount Rushmore of people that I never got to meet at a con or for whatever reason that I really, really wanted to meet. Some people were just, it was just never had the opportunity of which Julian was because I can't personally remember a con situation, at least not in recent memory. Perhaps maybe way back in my early cons, when I started doing things like MMC back around MMC 5, 20 plus years ago. Um, I mean, it's possible he could have been at a con that I was at, but I honestly can't say that I remember specifically a Julian Sands announcement at a convention that I was present versus somebody, like Angus Scrim, where all I can do is just look at myself and be like, Vamp, you fucked up there, dude. You had opportunities to meet that guy, especially with me being the subspecies fanatic that I am. And of course, everybody knows him as the tall man from Phantasm. But that's, one of those ones where I can only really look at myself and be like, nah, Vamp, that's on you, bro. But yes, absolutely love Julian Sands. I'm a big fan of one of his more recent movies, one of his final films that he did when he played a vampire, ironically, in Glenn Danzig's latest movie, Death Rider in the House of Vampires, which, perhaps, there's a future episode in store for that because that could definitely be some fun. But yes, Julian Sands, we love him. We've discussed him before in like Dario Argento, where he, was in his interpretation of Phantom of the Opera and things like that. But yes, Warlock, it's a fun trilogy. I've always held it in very high regards. I mean, there's a lot that I can pick apart about this franchise, and I kind of will, but like it just kind of is what it is. The biggest differences when it comes to these two trilogies is that it's not that I feel like one is, you know, necessarily better than the others because I'm very fond of Warlock. And I really enjoy the X trilogy. I do think it's quite excellent. I love Julian Sands. Of course, my ties back to like, witch history and stuff like that can play a little bit of a factor in my love affair of something that delves with witchcraft. But I've always really loved this movie, this series. The toughest thing about this franchise, is that I don't have Julian. Well, we don't have Julian for all of the movies. We have him for 2 out of 3. Very similar to somebody we're very, very fond of, as in like Andrew Devov. When it comes to Wishmaster. But anyway, we only have him for the first 2 out of the 3 movies. Um, I enjoy these movies for what they are, but what I definitely, and I think everybody can agree on that X has, is there's a much more quality polish on those movies. And again, it is important to keep in mind that there's 30 years between these franchises, pretty much. This is a late 80s, early 90s franchise, even though the third one came out in the late 90s. But the franchise in general, specifically when it comes to Julian's work, because that really is where it shines, is, you definitely get those late 80s, early 90s kind of cheesy effects. There's a lot of fun to them, but when it comes to like certain kills or certain deaths, not so much the victims per se, but when it comes to like villainous, kills and stuff like that, that are definitely kind of bizarre. You know, Julian's floating ability isn't exactly what I would say is something that I consider my favorite, ability to fly. As well as like just interesting way that they do things. Like at one point, he's got the Grimlock pages, flying around his head, almost like a slinky or like deck of cards kind of thing. And it's a little awkward in the special effects there. But again, that speaks more to the times and the equipment that was available then, as opposed to now. But anyway, I mean, I like the franchise a lot. I think the first movie starts off overall as a very, very strong movie in it. Again, a lot of like weirdness to it, things that kind of go wanting. But the idea of like, a witch hunter who's got the warlock, he's got him. He's got him jailed. He's, getting ready to do away with him, but then a lapse in their guard allows him to escape. And Satan sends him, like 20 years into the future for him to basically wreak havoc and try to find the Grimlock book, which is been stricken into three pieces and basically hidden around, which would be like the catalyst to bring, Satan back onto Earth, whether it's, similar to the puzzle box of Hellraiser or like, the Sorcerer's Stone in Harry Potter, things like that. And she's being the witch hunter, he's being aided by now, of course, a modern day girl who is basically wrong place, wrong time, ends up getting a spell cast on her, which is like a rapid aging spell. And so she kind of has to get involved in order to get back her personal property, which is what the spell is based around in her bracelet, to allow her to go back to being young again. So the hunt is on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's funny you talk a little bit about, I mean, the scene where, you might not have liked it. I loved it. I love the flying spell in the first one. The best way to make a flying spell is apparently little kid unbaptized
Yeah.
kid fat. Basically the fat of a little kid makes it flying, which is kind of funny because like in the second, when we get into the second warlock, he's flying around and he
Mhm.
didn't kill any little kids. So they probably like, okay, maybe we need to scrap that idea of killing little, unbaptized kids to fly around. So we're just gonna make him where he can fly earlier. But that's the other thing, about even the first movie, like you said, the girl that he takes the bracelet and makes her age and stuff like that. I love it. I love the fact that she wakes up the next day, she's got the long hair and she's aged 20 years and the long nails. The only part of the movie that didn't make any sense to me was the fact that she was diabetic and needed insulin, and she
Yeah.
just went 20 years without having any insulin. And it would kind of be like, when you watch the movie Old, where like the woman's, not getting any of that medication for all those years, it kind of kills her. And like
Yeah.
that was the only thing that didn't make any sense for that. But I mean, I do love the fact that, yeah, he's just basically playing on her vanity because she's like this young girl who thinks she's all this and all that. Now he's like, okay, now I'm just gonna take your beauty and your age, and I love the fact that she gets back at him a little bit with with one of the scenes I always thought was the funniest was hit her putting nails
Through the
through the
footsteps.
footprints and going through his foot, and then he realizes that, and then she finds the head version of it, and it's like, oh yeah, and then he gets it through the. I mean, to me, I'm like, okay, maybe why wouldn't you just kept on hammer? Why would you, if you hammered the one? I would have just kept going, man. I would have got nails and all that kind of stuff like that. But I mean, I always liked it, like I said, where it's like the premise of him going around trying to find these pages of the book to like basically the Necronomicon, or like
Yeah.
this like evil book that's supposed to like the grimoire, supposed to be able to give out the real true name of God and can basically undo things. And I always thought that was kind of cool. And I always loved his character in this movie, especially like, when it goes into the further Warlock, when we talk about Warlock 2 or Warlock 3, even though, like I said, even though Warlock 2 is still Julian Sands, and then obviously Warlock 3 is a different Warlock, but then again, it's a different Warlock in general, so it made no
Yeah.
sense to really have Julian Sands. I think it did hurt that they didn't have him because he was the best part of the franchise.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do love the fact that it's just like, he's just so brutally like he's pretty evil in the second one. But I think the way that he just doesn't give a fuck in this first movie is just so much better. You know what I mean? He's just like, whatever. I'm just gonna fucking kill everybody and just destroy people. He's killing little kids and
Yeah.
going after Amish people and shit like that. So it's like, yeah, I mean, like I said, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some things in this movie that you can pick apart with, for that, and maybe even the special effects and stuff like that. Yeah, like I said, it's in the early years of a lot of those special effects. But yeah, definitely the first movie is the highlight of the franchise. It's definitely the high point of the movie. I think it's just I mean I love the story in the second one, but I think the first one just had that stronger storyline, the
Yes.
the cast, and the fighting between his character and the other, the guy that's going after him, the Warlock killer or whatever like that. I do love the fact that they do, even though they call him a warlock and say like that, but he considers himself a witch. And I love
Mhm.
the fact that he says that he's a witch, and one kid's like, well, only girls are witches. He's like, no, boys can be witches too, And I
I love the
always,
fact that the little kid like kind of calls him out, like, you
yeah.
can't be a witch, you're a dude.
And I always liked that anyway because it is a lot of people would go predominantly, and people if people don't know the history of it, it's predominantly, witches were always known to be females,
Yeah,
but men could be witches, and that's the weird thing about it though. Men who were witches, it's weird to explain it. So like the witches thing, a lot of the things in Infernals don't realize that witches can be good and witches can be evil, and witches from men's side tend to usually be good, and if they're bad they tend to be considered warlocks. So that
yeah,
was like the whole thing where like, yeah, men can still be witches, and warlocks were always bad. Witches can be, even though there were were some witches that were men that were good and bad, it's just that warlocks were always tend to usually be bad because they were using the bad spells, and like the dark side, or like in Harry Potter, they were like, doing the shit that you weren't supposed to do.
yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, I like, and I like the little unsettling things. I mean, the way that you've got, Julian's character taking out like the poor Amish dude with the evil eye, and he's like black bleeding out of his eyes, and you know, the idea of like the mini, thumb and toe shackles, that you see right off the bat in the beginning, but then you see him awkwardly hobbling away with them as he's trying to escape the
Yeah,
second
which is
time.
which is which is funny about that scene because like, okay, so they puts the thumb thing, and he's got the one thumb and his one foot, and you said he's hobbling. I understand him hobbling for a little while because he's just trying to get away, but then eventually at one point, he gets down on the ground and undoes the thumbnail, undoes the toe, and then he can walk around. And I'm like, why you have done that like 20 minutes ago? They're not following you yet.
He goes
Why would
pretty
you go
far.
for like 30 miles of hobbling where it's
He
like
does
it didn't
he
make any
does
sense?
travel pretty he does travel pretty far, like like toe thumb hogtied.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, why would he take? I mean, like I said, I understand in the beginning because he's trying to run away from these guys, but once he realized that, okay, she's not following him right now, and he's dealing with the Amish guy in the eyeballs, after like 10, 15 minutes of hobbling it around, he could have been like, okay, now let me just take this off real quick. And no,
Yeah.
he goes another 20, 30 miles running until eventually he falls down. And then that's when he goes like, okay, now that I'm down, I'm like, why would you take that shit? It would have been so much easier to take that shit off to begin with and then run. You could have gotten so much further.
Yes. But I mean, and so I love, and then ultimately as it makes its way, because there's plenty of cool little carnage, there's plenty of like bloodshed in this movie, and a lot of like very like cool kind of like stylized, like old school stylized kills, which I could actually really appreciate. And then as it gets to like the overall like, you know area of like, this is the part that I also find kind of interesting, because I'm like, we have to take a second to discuss this. So it's the idea of the grimoire being protected in burial ground, and that witches cannot cannot go on to like, burial ground, and you know and Redfern and Cassandra, I believe, find out where they need to go to find the last pages protected and whatnot. And so they already have this meeting and they run off to go and do this. And then they find out. And so then it makes me laugh because like it's so bizarre. Um, is the fact that like your they basically had the goose given up by like a priest. Um, can we talk about the fact that by the warlock threatening the priest's apparent wife's unborn child, that we're seemingly supposed to ignore the fact that priests are, they don't have sex. They don't have marriages like that. I'm not saying, I don't know enough about the Catholic religion specifically as to whether or not you can or cannot have a wife. But the idea of like him threatening to murder the unborn child of his wife in order to get him to give up where they went, I was kind of like, so y'all expect us to just ignore that and just look at it as a no, protect the child. You know, give up the goose. You can't kill a baby like that. No, you're not going to get a pass on that. Not when you're doing kind of a religious dominant style movie. You definitely need to be slightly on your P's and Q's a little bit more when it comes to that. But anyway, I mean, I love the idea of like a little bit of like, inner turmoil and kind of like mental weakness when it came to Redfern when she found the casket that they felt the book was buried in, because it was to have a hex symbol on it. And then she realizes something and she's like, oh, well, this casket's undisturbed. So maybe we should just leave it alone. And she's like, yeah, that's a good idea. You don't need to look at this one, which makes him curious to find out that that's his own coffin. And she's trying to talk him down, like, well, you didn't think you were going to live forever, did you? Like you're 20, 30 years in the future. Like, you know, but, they ultimately also then find out that the pages of the book are also not there anyway, as very similar to our old franchise conversation with Poltergeist is parts of the cemetery and coffins had been moved to areas that were not protected and were not considered hollow ground.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Whenever they go to that, she doesn't realize that, and she's doing, doing the dirt, and that he can't touch the ground, so he's flying around like the whole entire time. And yeah, you get the giggles whenever he's like, "Oh crap!" and she's trying to get the pages off of it, and move his fingers, and it's going really. She breaks one. He's like, hurry up!" And she's like, "Well, I'm not trying not to break your, bones and stuff like that." Cause she's like, "I don't want you to hurt you," even though she's like, so he's like, he gets buried into that. But I love like the fact where it's like, wait, this isn't holy ground. And then you get like the comedy thing where it's like, these are getting moved to, brand new space. It's like, oh yeah, great. I mean, it's like, like you said in Poltergeist, it's like disturbing, that you're going to move all these water, move all these graves and stuff like that. But then ultimately it's funny because he throws her into the water and she realizes, oh yeah, he doesn't like salt water. Well, let me just use this, and boom, it gets him with the salt water kind of gag. But yeah, I was just like, yeah, I just love the whole fact. It's like, yeah, you want to, people who get buried and people who are super religious are always like, yeah, you got to be buried on hollow ground and stuff like that. Where it's like now these businesses are like, yeah, we don't even, we don't care about that shit. We just want to, this ground's better. This dirt and ground is better for our complex that we're gonna put up right next to this and shit like that. So I just found that kind of funny. And then they win the day, and he kind of goes and turns into like a tornado that goes right back into his thing, and then all of a sudden you see the etch on the coffin saying pretty much thank you or whatever like that, and you're like, oh okay, what the hell, like he just like miraculously just went woo, okay, back into it.
Yeah, but I mean I do, but I also can appreciate too that ultimately the last 20 seconds of the movie, it hits you in the feels in kind of a cool little way, because I liked the inscription that comes up where he's basically saying, thank you and I'll never forget you. And then you see her going out to dispose of or hide the book in a new location in the biggest area of like salt dunes in the world.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah, I
like,
always thought
what?
that was kind of cool.
I remember seeing that for the first time, being like, what? She's gonna move to the desert? Like years ago when I watched it, I was like, the fuck? She's just gonna move out and live in the desert? How stupid is that? That's so anticlimactic. Then the camera panned over to the sign telling exactly where she was, and I'm like, I retract my previous statement. That's not anticlimactic at all. That's genius.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of, like I said, when we go into that, I kind of wish that, they make that cool idea where it's like, yeah, this is Warlock, and you can't get him, and then the thing is pieces and stuff like that, blah 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 blah, and the salt thing. I was like, dude, that's such a cool way of like basically like kind of hiding something where that obviously he's not going to be anybody who him or anybody else that's evil is not going to be able to to retrieve it because of the salt, and the salt's not good for him and whatnot. And then you get right into the second one where it was just like, okay, yeah, where he's just now there's these gems that just came out of nowhere that
He
now
dies.
can
You can kill a
birth.
warlock by vampire light.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like they made that ending, and when you got the sequel, you're like, oh, okay, cool. You're gonna figure out like how they're gonna get him out of this the salt prison. And it's like yet to never mention that at all in the second movie. I was just kind of like, we're kind of robbed from such a cool way to like
Yeah.
hide a body that's hide this thing that you can't get. And that's, I mean, maybe that's the reason why in the second movie they don't go after the grimoire, they go after these jewels instead. They're like, okay, he can't go after that, so maybe we gotta find something else that he can latch onto then again. And I do like him, the the birthing of him in the second movie. I thought that was really, really cool because each person's got the stone, she's got the birthing stone, and you see this girl just like talking, and she's getting ready to go out, and she's looking sexy, then literally is like 9 months pregnant in like 2 seconds, and then basically just gives birth to a baby human Julian Sands, like a
Dude, it
tall
was
ass
it was funny.
motherfucker.
Oh, I know. And it was funny too, Devil, because I haven't watched the second movie in a little while. Like I've watched the Warlock trilogy a few times, but like it's also the first Warlock movie that I'm particular, understandably and kind of rightfully so. But of course, that's the first movie. That's the movie I gravitate towards more often, because I really just like the design and concept of that movie. But man, I was so grateful to be watching that movie by myself without Mrs. Vamp here while she was at work when I watched it a while back to get ready for this because I completely forgot about that death of a dog scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, uh-oh, she ain't gonna like that scene.
Yeah, completely forgot about that. Yeah, as slimy little weird birthing snake like baby to adult Julian Sands comes out and then just like grabs and bites or strangles and then just fucking dwarf tosses the fucking puppy dog across the room and you're just like, okay, well, I guess this is I guess this is going to be a scene. I guess this is going to be a thing. But yeah, it's a completely different concept. I mean, I if I was doing Warlock 2 based off the original Warlock, I mean, obviously I feel like it kind of goes without saying the concept of being able to get to the grimoire has to stem around some type of possession or familiar to Julian Sands' character as somebody who's not magically, induced that can go into that area. But also at the same time, if it's hidden correctly, the ability to even find that book in all that sand doesn't exactly surprise me that they chose not to go in that direction. Maybe for the sake of not making it particularly obvious. But yeah, warlocks, witches, druids, they all fall into that same kind of like, Roman Catholic stylistically religious like categories and stuff like that. So I can understand going this direction, but yeah, then again at the same time, it's it's weird. We're gonna break it down a little bit all anyway now anyway, but it still is weird. We're like, I didn't hate the going after the six crystals, similar to going after the three sections of the book. But I liked the idea of salt being such an important player in the demise of a witch, where now it's just where sunlight, but in this movie any light, which seemed weird to me. you know, where even in a movie like for a split second, even in a movie like Hocus Pocus, light to witches is not it's not an unusual, you know, weapon. It's been documented that it's a thing, but it really always was pure light, like actual sunlight. You know, like anybody who's seen the end of Hocus Pocus. But now getting back on point, when we get more into the details of it, is like, but now you've got the lights that are like part of like a car and stuff like that that are like I get it for certain purposes, but it just doesn't like make as much sense. But anyway, the story of this one, I liked it just fine. I liked the idea of like this couple who come from like druid parents and have like some magical abilities that they don't totally have the grips and grasp on, but they know they can start some shit. Like trying to collect these crystals, but having one as a hand me down from their family as Julian is trying to do a scavenger hunt.
But yeah, like you were saying, with the in the first Warlock movie, like you said, where it goes into the witches and the Warlock kind of lore, and this one kind of has more of that Druid pagan kind of lore, where they're able to listen to the trees and the earth, and they can move rocks and move things with their minds, and the fact that like I love the fact that they have to be killed to kind of get their powers to a point too, where it's like, oh, that's just my dad and my uncle coming. Oh shit, he just blew me away with a shotgun. Thanks for ruining my shirt, Dad.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? To the point where they're getting all the signs and stuff like that. Where it's gonna rain blood and trees are gonna have maggots in them and things like that. So I always love that aspect to it. And that's the that was like the the qualifying good part of the second movie was I did like that. I love the fact that the two kids are kind of learning and they're these
Yeah.
warriors and they're gonna go out and try to fight against against the warlock that's getting these ones. I mean, to me, one of my still my favorite of all of them was when he gets the stone at the fashion show. He's just walking
Yeah.
through this fashion show and the girls are like, "What the hell?" He's backstage. These girls are all naked and stuff like that. And they're like, "You can't be here." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I want that." He's like, "That stone. Oh yeah, you like that stone?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, it's not for sale." "Well, you're gonna give it to me." And she's like, "What?" And flies her up in the air and she gives it to him and she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a warlock. Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're a witch, yeah, sure." And then gets him up in the air and then like, typical kind of like wishmaster, style, like, "Okay, here you go." Drop. Drops her and goes to
Oh,
her death.
oh, dude, that was so good. Like just through the roof, through the catwalk, explosion of blood all over the place. And the funny thing is, like you see the shrapnel and the stuff and you see the stuff that she's going down through and she hits and you see like her blood go on this dude, her blood go on this chick and whatnot, but then they put the camera back on her and it's just a massacre and a giant shard of glass is going like right through half of her and I was just like fuck me, dude.
Yeah, yeah, I always like that, and I love the fact that yeah, like in this movie, it's like every time he goes, he's like, he goes to the dealer and stuff like that, and goes. I love the fact that it, like you he even says like you're gonna give me these and like everyone's like I'm not gonna give you these and he's like I'll give you this or that or you can do all kind of like I said when he's making these will and he's dealing and he's doing all these things to these people to get these stones, it like I said it just has that kind of wishmaster feel to it where it's like he gives you what you want, it's just not exactly how you wanted it, and I love the when he goes to the freak house and the warning, the little Zelda's like, hey, read a warning. Like he throws him into into like the catacomb thing closes and like I guess you really were a powerful medium.
I loved the fact that they busted out the Iron Maiden in this movie. I
Yeah,
was like, yes, fucking let's go.
yeah, yeah. So yeah. It's like throw him in the Iron Maiden. Excellent.
Excellent. Execute them. Bogus. But no, I mean, it's again, it's another cool movie. It's very strong. Again, it's a different time frame. Equipment wise, special effects style. But I still think they did a good job. like you said, the story is probably overall a little bit stronger actually in the second movie, which is actually, well documented to be uncommon when it comes to franchises and stuff like that. But it's a cool specific, take. While I think the concepts, whether but behind, you know, capturing, you know, and what takes down a witch is is cleaner in the first movie. I think the concepts for how to take down a witch are a little sloppy in Armageddon, but I still agree with you that it's definitely an overall like better story because the first movie's kind of more that Terminator based type style. Guy comes from the future or the past, chased by another person from the future or the past, and the hunter chasing the hunted, kind of a thing. There's a little bit more subtle nuances to the telling of this story, and like the ability of like, these children of druids were also killed but are able to be resurrected as their powers would allow them to, getting kind of sucked into this, protection of the earth, but still mixed with that kind of like, well, as long as he doesn't come after me. And what I mean is he kind of has that kind of feel to it where it's like, I don't really necessarily want to be involved in this, but if I'm going to be vaporized just like everybody else, I'd really rather, keep, the storings and the whole Armageddon thing, to a minimum. It's like, hey, I'd like to be able to enjoy my life, however it's being laid out, now that I'm done with my parents, kind of a thing. So maybe I should stop this guy from like destroying the overall world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, I mean, I like it. Like you said, the ending was kind of weird. Like I said, with the truck, with the light being going
Yeah.
on the crystal, and it's like, but it's bright light from like a redneck, truck, that's got like the deer light on it or some kind of shit like that. You're like, okay, yeah, that doesn't quite make sense to it. But then again, like I said, overall, like I said, I've always enjoyed the second film. I still, like I said, I still put the first film as being the definitely the highlight. And and it's kind of funny, being the fact that, like we've talked about it before, but even with our first time with our franchises, you chose Witchboard, and we talk about, Witchboard 1 obviously was the king of movies. The second one was decent and fun, but and then the third one was just a travesty. It almost comes, it's like you choose you love these franchise where your third one is just bomb, and you kind of go that same direction here with Warlock 3. I mean,
It's not my fault, Devil. It's really
yeah,
not. We were
I'm
actually
not yeah, I'm not
we were
against the fact that they didn't use Julian Sands. I mean, I wish they would have, but I get it because it's a completely different. Now, if it would have been the same Warlock, I'd have
yeah.
been like, okay, this is shitty. How do you have the same Warlock come around three times, and then if he does, how are you not using Julian Sands? So I do enjoy that fact that they, at least if it's not Julian Sands, it's cool that it's a different Warlock. But yeah, that third one is just like Witchboard 3. I don't think it's as bad as Witchboard 3 was, but
No, it's definitely not.
it's definitely like, yeah, it's definitely the sour note of a pretty decent, franchise in Warlock, with the third one.
Yeah, no, 100%, and it's one of those, yeah, it's like history repeating itself, but completely like unintentionally. It's just kind of the way that the dominoes fell for this one because like, and it's got some cool things. Like, I mean, I love look, it's the idea of like, these friends, and it's cool to see our girl Ashley Lawrence in this movie, outside of the Hellraiser franchise because we love our Ashley Lawrence, and I'm a big Hellraiser nerd, and we got to spend some time with one of the chatterers the other day, so shout out to our experience that Devil and I had at Horror on Main recently. So that was a lot of fun. But anyway, like it's a cool-ish enough concept of a movie, in the direction that it's trying to go. But again, it just falls flat. It seems like it tries to go a little bit towards that like that late 80s, like kind of like trying to like resurrect that that idea. Hold on a second, dude. Pause. I gotta pick this. It's one of my insurance people. One second, dude. Don't pause it again. I think they accidentally called me again because they just did a missed call. All right, fuck it. I ain't picking that thing up again unless it's Megan. Dude, I swear, Devil, and that was not intentional, man. It's just kind of the way that the dominoes fell when it came to this franchise as well. But again, you're totally right. I mean, everything about Witchboard 3 was an absolute train wreck. When it came to this one, I think you make a lot of, valid points in it. It's like, we love our girl. We love Ashley Lawrence, for how much we love, Hellraiser and other movies that she's done. And so she is super duper awesome. And you and I recently, even got to meet one of the various chatterers from the Hellraiser franchise. So, hey, shout out to Horror on Main for the experience that me and Devil and Mrs. Devil had recently. So that was definitely super cool. But again, this third movie, it's okay. It's got some points to it. But one of the bigger things that kind of drove me a little nuts about the third movie is, yes, again, as I would love it to have been Julian Sands, I guess it sort of makes sense to not, again, use a guy that you've already killed twice in two completely different ways, where it's like, hey, there's got to be more evil, there's got to be other evil witches out there for Satan to use, just like there's 007. Well, it's like we only know there to be 007, but there had to have been a 001 to 006 at some point. So that's just kind of the way that I look at that, where it's like, okay, I guess he had to go to his next, really skilled witch to try to do this. But anyway, there's parts of this movie I like. I think it was just kind of a bit of a struggle as well, because I kind of felt like they tried to capitalize on some of that late 90s, even late 80s, early 90s, like group slasher stuff, where it's like a group of victims, where there was really no, there was the main girl, who had to break the aging process, but was really the main final girl of Warlock. Then you had, the boyfriend girlfriend couple in the second movie. Okay, that's cool. That's solid enough. You had their families involved, but that was more for story building. And then the families got written. So I get that. This one just kind of had a little bit more of that awkward, like friends out doing friends things, like, Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer. So it was kind of a slightly weirder design when it came to that, as far as like, you know, playing victim in there. But the movie had it had some fun kills. It had some cool points. I mean, I loved the fact that one of the friends was a witch, but nowhere near as strong as skilled. And he just, turned her into a glass statue and then just blew her into a million pieces. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm down for that. But again, it's not only is it the weakest part of the trilogy, it's drastically the weakest movie in the trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, yeah, there's definitely some, like you said, there's definitely some good points in the movie that I thought were fun. And like you said, it's always great to see Ashley Lawrence in the movie and see some of Ashley Lawrence's skin in the movie too. So that's always nice. But yeah, I mean, there's just the three major things that I despise in this film are like the three tropes that you get in so many movies over again. One, they're all supposed to be college students. They're all like in their fucking 40s.
Right.
They're all old as shit. Okay, so and then like the girl gets goes and says, "Okay, I'm gonna go walk home," and she walks home another way. But then literally they all live in a dorm room that's all right next to each other. So we're like, okay, so this is like a completely co-ed dorm room
It
and
was
shit
so
dorm
that scene
area.
was
So
so Harold and Kumar, dude. That whole like,
yeah,
hey, do you need to go back and get your cell phone? Oh, it's right there. Nah, we've come too far. It was
yeah. It's
so
like, okay, so you had that trope. You had the, oh, someone in your family that was like your last uncle, great aunt, or someone you have never met has died and has willed you this house that's got all this creaky, oopy, ooky stuff in all in it. I'm like, come on, that's been done 9 billion times. And then you have the guy who is in love with the girl that doesn't want to admit that he's in love with the girl, kind of shit. And it's just like that. And like I said, I did appreciate the girl witch in it, but then again, she was just way, very underused and like
Yeah,
over exaggerated as far as like what would be on quote unquote witch people. So she's doing the tarot, but she's doing the tarot completely wrong when she's doing it
yeah,
the whole entire time. So I'm just like laughing. I'm like, okay, but yeah, like I said, those are the major points. I'm like, yeah, it just makes this movie just not comic. Where the first one and the second one, you can definitely tell they did their research and did a little bit of a good backstory. With this one, they're just like, yeah, let's just get what sells in every other movie and just throw it into this, and we're gonna do it. Where the guy's like a collector, and he's gonna buy some stuff, and he's looking at buying a house, but he knows stuff about the house because he's a historian, and yeah, that whole people are getting killed in this movie, and you don't even realize that they're not around
yeah.
anymore, and it's just like it was like, oh, yeah, it's just, I don't know. Yeah, it just became like the whole movie as a whole is just a mess versus like, those first two ones that were well done and well clean. Like I said, there's points in each one that, that things that you can nitpick and stuff like that, but it's not nearly as bad as that third one where you're just,
No.
just nitpicking everything.
Right. And it's one of those things where, like, when it comes to, like, my physical collection of movies and stuff, if there are franchises that I am particularly fond of, like, yeah, I'll even get the bad movies because I just don't feel like I need a hole in my franchise collections. But there's definitely certain things about this movie that I'm just like, couldn't you have just left its ability to just be a cool little two pack,
Yeah.
Just like our Wishmaster 1 and 2 2 pack that like Robert liked to make fun of with the way that Andrew signed mine. But just be like, did you really need to squeeze blood from a stone when it came to this third movie? I just don't think they did. So anyway, that's where we'll cut it off when it comes to like the warlocks as we, so let's as we move our way over to the devil's favorite sin and skin. So when it comes to the franchise Warlock as a whole, look, as far as a franchise that I hold very like dear to myself, I enjoy it on a level of 7, 7.5. That's like my happy place for I find it because I do find it to be a quality franchise that I do like and I do revisit on, a regular enough basis. Not, not often, not like specifically. But Warlock definitely gets into like my Halloween rotations around that and stuff like that. And then periodically, maybe I, check out the second Warlock one every now and then, even though it's typically Warlock one all the time, like I said before. Honestly, this was probably only about the third time I've ever watched the third Warlock movie, and that's, for good reason. It's just because definitely a matter of just kind of like freshening everything up. But, but overall, as a collective franchise, like being, honest on a level where I do look at Warlock, as a, you know, Warlock is like a good 7.5. And I look at Warlock 2, even though I find it to be a slightly more superior story. I like the execution of the first one still a little bit better, where I look at the movie as more like a 7. The movie of Warlock 3 is just such a downgrade out of it that it does hurt things overall, where I truly look at that movie in the ballpark of like 5, 5.5. So 6.5 is what I'm going to give Warlock overall for my score.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you when it comes to scaling. Like you said, you definitely Warlock one is that high ground. You can give it like a 7.75, even to an 8. At some point, you can even give it to that where it's such a good movie. I can watch it over and over again. I love Julian Sands in that movie. I just love the whole execution of that one. And like you said, like even the second one, it's a little bit a little bit more down, but not so much further than Warlock 1 because it's still a fun movie. It's still got a good story and it's still got those
Yeah.
good characters in it. Yeah, and then obviously, yeah, like you said, definitely driving the series down is definitely the Warlock 3. Not even though it's not as like I said, it's not as bad as that Witchboard. Yeah, I would definitely not give it anything more than a 5. Personally myself too.
Yeah.
So I feel like where the 6 point, I think 6.5 as a series, it sucks because if they didn't have that third one, it probably would be more of like a 7, in the 7 range, 7.5 maybe range if it wasn't for that third one. That third one just gives it such a crushing the balls that like I said, I think overall, yeah, that third one hurts the franchise so much. That's what drops it down. So I'm cool with a 6.5. I think for the Warlock franchise, like I said, which sucked because like you said, I mean, I love Warlock 1 so much that like I said, I would even give it even a higher
Yeah.
one just because I've always loved it. But it's just you got to score that third one just so low that it's just going to drive that average down.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and who knows, it's we can't really do it now because it just won't work, it won't the episode wouldn't hit as hard as it should. But had when we were discussing what we were going to do for franchises, we also had Wishmaster in the conversation. It was actually strongly in the conversation. And now looking back at it, maybe there's a small part of me that's like, damn, this could have been really good if we did Julian Sands Warlock specifically against Andrew Devoff's Wishmaster.
Yeah, like the 2-2.
Yeah. Where I'm like, fuck, that might have been a missed opportunity, Devil. But that doesn't mean that we don't have some Wishmaster love in our future because I know we're gonna do something cool with it later down the line. But now as I'm kind of like looking at it where it's like, yeah, it's they're strong movies and we love Julian, but fuck that third one, man. Just kind of hit my brain where I was like, damn, if maybe we had pumped our own brakes a little bit back when we were having that conversation and been like, what do you think of this idea? That could have been a very, very interesting possibility. So, oh well, say la vie. That's just kind of the way it is. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Infernos. We're going to give the Warlock franchise as a whole a 6.5 on the obituaries. Now we're going to move on over to a little bit of the devil's favorite topic as we talk a little bit about sin and skin. And like I said, a little bit of murder as well, as we're not now going to talk a lot about the X franchise with Mia Goth, where we're going to talk about X, the prequel Pearl, and then the subsequent trilogy slash sequel to X in Maxine. But a very, very cool franchise. I really like Ty's West's idea on this franchise. I was pretty in it to win it right when it started. I actually had to get caught up on Maxine because I never saw any of them in the theaters, but I picked them all up respectively pretty quickly, with the exception of Maxine. I still actually haven't been able to get a physical copy of that, but I was still able to watch it. But I loved the idea of X very, very much that Texas Chainsaw, obviously House of a Thousand Corpses, feel to it, as well with also with Rob Zombie, a little bit, in my opinion, of a bit of that 31 feel to it as well, just by the time periods, the dress, the mannerisms, and the style of that. But yeah, X basically takes place as this group of independent filmmakers and actors and actresses that are making a snuff film. They're making a pornography movie on this small farm next to a elderly couple that have really not lived the lives that they were hoping to live. And especially the wife, Pearl, who subsequently is actually being played by the same actress in Mia Goth, who's playing the Maxine character. But that's basically kind of the gist of it. Is it's this up and coming, actors and actresses in the porn industry, filming on location on this farm next to a couple that didn't get to really enjoy their life, to be honest. The the husband lived, he fought in both world wars, so he was gone all the time from home. His wife Pearl really wanted to be famous. She wanted to be an actress. She used to be a dancer. She used to do all this really, really cool stuff back when she was young, but now she's just kind of old, and the age of her husband allows her not to be able to get certain passions that a married couple would still want to do even in later years. And having seeing these young people with their whole lives ahead of them was becoming a difficult thing for the couple to handle.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I like about this series too, you know what I mean? Because like, you start off with that X. I love the fact that, it's one of those movies that when you found out the Pearl and that Pearl is a prequel of the old lady who's, in the X movie, that they, both played by Mia Goth playing the, Maxine character and playing the Pearl character, with all the makeup and stuff. I love the fact that they kind of shot each movie, even when this trilogy, every movie is shot exactly how movies were kind of shot then. That's this first movie, X is like that late 79 kind of film, so it's got that grainy kind of look to it, that
Yeah.
grindhouse feel to it. Pearl, is in the 50s, so it's got that 50s color, technicolor kind of feel to it. And then, subsequently, Maxine, when we talk a little bit about that, that's made in the 80s, so it's got that 80s feel to it. But I love the fact that they made the first, this X movie and Pearl secretly. They filmed it secretly without anybody really knowing, because there
Yeah.
was, even though he kind of wanted to do a trilogy, you never know if like studios are gonna go for and stuff like that. And I love the fact that, because when you watch it, especially when you watch it in sequence, you have experts like that, and then you go back into the 50s and Pearl, but they're still in that same farmhouse, and you see the shots of the house and things like that. I love that, because it's like it just makes sense to kind of like, well, if you're gonna do both these movies, you might as well record both these movies at the same time secretly, just because it's in the same location. You don't have to worry about doing all this stuff like that. And I love it, like especially when you see it, when you watch X and then you kind of watch Pearl, you see a little bit of those kind of things. Like you have the house, so you can see that. The fact that in the movie where in the beginning, she towards the end or in the middle when she kills the guy for the first time, that's trying to escape because he's pissed off that his girlfriend wanted to kind of do porn, and he just wanted he wanted to film porn and watch these people fuck, but he didn't want his girlfriend to be part of it, which is so critically, when this movie was made, it's got Jenna Ortega in that
Yeah.
character, and now she's kind of blown up, a big huge star herself now, obviously with like Wednesday, playing the Wednesday character in the Netflix series. So it's kind of cool to see her in this. But yeah, the boyfriend gets kind of pissed off and kind of go away, and Pearl stops him and then does a little bit of a dance that she does like in this weird slow motion that eventually they draw back to that in Pearl with her doing that dance. And you find out, in X, that the girl's walking around and there's like a big giant huge fucking alligator in this lake, and subsequently gets a little bit of meat eaten in the X, but then you find out more about that crocodile, that alligator character in Pearl. So I love how it's like, the when you watch these movies, especially with X and Pearl being that kind of coherent, kind of wobbling back and forth, it's kind of cool. I would actually, I don't know if Ty is going to do it. I know Ty has done some conventions. I know he was at Monster Mania Oaks the one time, so that was kind of cool that he's still, you know, not. I mean, he's done a lot of cool movies, and he's done some big movies and stuff like that that have been big. But he's on that level where he can still go to cons and you can kind of meet him. Where like someone like Quentin Tarantino or something like that is not there. Where Eli Roth can do cons, but Eli Roth is like. Not, I wouldn't go as far as saying, I mean, because he's kind of going back up on the scale because of Thanksgiving, but for a little while he was more of that kind of going down a little more, so he makes it a little bit easier where you're kind of you can kind of meet Ty at the beginning of this level of where he's at. But I would really love to see them make a X Pearl movie kind of shot simultaneously together or something like that would
Yeah.
be kind of cool just to kind of see the thing. But like I said, I mean, as far as when we were talking about X and stuff like that, I mean, who doesn't want to, see how Debbie Does Dallas got made? You know what I mean? I love the fact that you know, it's the very beginning of that 70s where, pornos obviously have been around, but, they're exploiting the home video, and basically these porns now can be just made by anybody in their back house as long as you got a camera and some recording gear. You don't have to have a big kind of a studio and stuff like that with this porn home is coming into it. So I love that story. It's like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna make this simple, and the porn story is funny. It's
Yeah.
it's your typical porn movie. They're out in the middle of nowhere. It's the farmer's daughter, like, oh man, why don't you come in here and milk me like I milked the cow or something stupid, and it's got that cheesiness into it. But like I said, then you add in that extra thing when like I said, when Pearl starts going on her killing rampage, and she just like, it's like I said, even with the feel of the house and stuff like that, like you said, it's definitely very Texas Chainsaw-ish kind of feel to it, where it's got a little bit of that. But I love the fact that you get into those characters and they get whacked and everybody gets killed and everything is really really cool and super like over glorified. And then like I said, it's just like who doesn't like watching girls just getting naked constantly. You got you got both of them, kind of like, in this 70s porn, at the time where, they got the African American character in there that's just doing it. And they're just like, she's like, holy shit. And like, throughout the whole time when they're making the porn, apparently this guy's got a big, huge dong long and long. And then lo and behold, when, he looks out the door or something like that, stands out the door, you see it's like basically hanging down to his ankles.
Yeah, that he's got some serious dong swinging going on in that. There's a quality tripod in effect.
For sure.
Yeah, but it's cool, man. But yeah, I mean, it's a solid movie, much more of that slasher type feel to it. I mean, the franchise as a whole is kind of more of that slasher type feel to it, but this movie in particular just kind of has that design to it. The kills are like super cool. The funny thing is when, when the black dude character is taken out, he's actually kind of one of like the more like weaker kills just because like it goes from like having a conversation like with the husband where he's basically being accused of trying to seduce his wife to just kind of being just shotgun killed, just kind of in like the blink of an eye. One of my, the opening kill to the guy who just wants to be a film like a photographer. He's stabbed so many times in the neck that it becomes a decapitation. I mean,
Yeah.
that was insane. And the funny thing is, especially with Jenna at the height of what she is now, she's epically wasted in this movie. Like you just see her running out the door to just having her head blown off. And it happens so fast that it's almost kind of like, holy shit. And again, the bubble hadn't even really popped yet on her because like, this movie's 2002. So like she's filming Wednesday, but it's not like out like that. Um, and she's appearing in Scream, but she's not the focal point of Scream. And obviously, it's 2 years before the second Beetlejuice movie. So, her face is popping up in places, but it's nothing like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool movie. It's a cool concept. I love the idea of what Ty wrote and like how he was putting everything together when it came to that. I mean, you had a very, just, you had the one girl that is like looking to make it as kind of like she's kind of like, Maxine's like bestie, and she just gets, just pie faced into the fucking water and then just gets alligator chomped, and so many just unique, interesting kills. One of the weirder kind of downer ones is actually the death of the husband, where he basically just got scared. He just got startled to death.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my favorite one out of all of them has got to be it's one that you saw coming. and no pun intended, saw coming. But the guy looking through the peephole,
Oh yeah,
and then gets the whatever fucking that
the
thing,
pitchfork.
pitchfork, gets the pitchfork to the eye. Very, very Friday the 13th,
Yeah,
boom. But I'm like, yeah, you know, as soon as he steps on that nail and to begin with, his legs all bloody, and then he's getting doing all this, and then he's looking, yeah, he's obviously looking through the peephole, and you're like, yeah, he's getting, yeah, like everybody knows he's getting a pitchfork to the eyes, you know what I mean? But it's still cool. Yeah, I love the alligator, the alligator munching and crunching. Yeah, like you said, the old man, kind of getting a heart attack kind of kill was kind of like, okay. And then,
yeah,
obviously Pearl getting killed at the very end. I love it because, Maxine is like, is that, she's that final girl. She's that girl that's just not gonna, not going to, be taken advantage of, and she's gonna survive this outcome brutally as hard as she can, which subsequently, when we get into Maxine, she even talks about that because somebody was asking her about her ability to survive, and she's like, "Oh, trust me, I've been there. I do whatever I can to survive." And that, obviously she, in X she does. But I mean, like I said, and I love the fact that, like you said, we, when you go into the Pearl, you kind of learn about, because, like you said, you're watching this movie, and she's talking to her about her life, and she's talking to her about the things that she wanted to do, and that she was kind of wanted to be an actress, and she was, she's gotten old, and now she doesn't feel like she's beautiful anymore, and she's talking to Maxine's character about it and stuff like that. And I love the fact that, okay, now you go into Pearl, which is obviously the prequel of her story, because she's such an interesting character,
yeah,
especially with the fact that she's just an old lady that's kind of, when you see her in X, she's like, you're not really 100% sure what's all going on with her. She's kind of just staring at these people all the time, and she just looks like an old coot that's gonna do. But then, like I said, then she's goes on a murdering spree, and then you find out, the one scene where she's laying in bed naked with Maxine and touching her and kind of creepy, and you could tell that she still, even at the age wherever she's at in the 80s or 90s, that she's still, still sexually wanting to be sexually active, and obviously wanting to have sex with, with the old man, even though he's got erectile dysfunction and all that kind of stuff. Being an old man, the tinker doesn't work quite as well as it did back in the day. But I love that, and it kind of goes, when he goes into the Pearl, it kind of explains
yeah,
that, like, where she's doing that. It's in the 50s, where all their husbands have pretty much have gone to war, and her husband's kind of left her home with her mother, and her mother's, hardcore German accent, and kind of just running this farm with, with her mother and her father and her, you have the, the plague that had been going around, and getting people sick and stuff like that. So the father's kind of an invalid, and she's got to kind of help around the house and do chores and clean her dad and do all this stuff like that. But she definitely, Pearl feels like she needs to, that she's meant to be doing something else, that she always felt like she's a star. And that's why, then her friend comes and says, hey, they're having a, talent show where they're going to pick a girl from our town, and they're going to take her on this big huge tour. And she's like, ooh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to win this, and I'm guaranteed to win this. And she gets down there and does her monologue. But obviously, the one thing that that goes even to when it goes into X, she says she hates the blondes, and there's a
yeah.
reason why she hates the blondes, because the blondes beauties get all the acts. And but poor old Pearl, she doesn't quite satisfy those, those people who want to click those boxes of, like, the blonde hair, the Barbie type, cheerleader, beautiful, skinny, tall, big breasts and things like that. She doesn't quite check those boxes, even though she theoretically probably, you really don't get to see any of the talent shows of the talents of the other people. You kind of
Yeah.
just see them go into the thing, obviously not get the part and cry. And you kind of see her thing, and she does this little monologue thing, and she probably could have been a really good actress, and people, done something well with her life. But like you said, they just they want what they want, and the type of person they wanted was somebody who was the opposite of Pearl.
Yeah, no, 100%. And actually, similar to Warlock 2, Devil, like when it comes to this movie, like Warlock 2, I actually think that Pearl is the better story. I
Yeah,
think it's actually a much better telling in a movie when it comes to this franchise. Honestly, I think the two franchise overall do map out very well. I like Warlock and X. I think Warlock 2 and Pearl have better stories. And I think that Warlock 3 and Maxine are actually downers in comparison to the other movies. And again, we're going to get into Maxine shortly. And this isn't a precursor to me shitting on it because I don't feel that in any way. But in retrospect, I do feel like, where most franchises start up here and then just go down, I do think that both of these franchises for their own specific reasons go like, this kind of a thing, where there is improvement, even though the first movie is still the strength. There's an improvement in the second movie, but then a drop in the third. But again, it's very hard to make lightning strike twice, which I think they definitely did when it came to X and Pearl. It's very hard to make it, strike a third time, which I do believe that Maxine, similar to Warlock 3, it just wasn't quite gonna score like the other ones did. And I also think that has a lot to do with the fact too, is that, everybody now has like, the brain waves of a gnat. And so sometimes if you really aren't on your game, it's very difficult to keep you know, to keep a franchise very strong over an extended period of time. Again, we've talked at length about like the Hellraiser franchise and stuff like that. And just like a quickie little blurb from me, like Hellraiser 1, fucking fantastic. Hellraiser 2, incredibly strong. And Ashley's fantastic in both of those. I know there's a certain amount of minority when it comes to myself, when it comes to this movie, but I love Hellraiser 3. I think it's incredibly strong. I do think one of the bigger issues is the fact that the Cenobites are not as strong. A little bit Cenobites from Wish, they just don't come across as strong. The way some of them were created, I thought made sense and I thought it worked. But just overall, they didn't have that pure impact that, Barbie Wild had and the original Chatterer had and the twins and the other two twin like the wire twins, but then with the cylinder holding their skin together, all that kind of stuff. So much more strength, but the story itself of Hellraiser Hell on Earth, I'll die on the hill for that fight. I think that was an incredibly well written story for that movie. But anyway, I love the idea when it comes to Pearl of getting into that backstory, which again, it was announced that that was the design of it, of why this elderly lady maybe went the way that she went. And the idea, and you would put it in the notes, but it was absolutely something I was going to address regardless because it was so clear to me, especially based off other interests and loves that I have. Oh man, can we have a closer, like, tell me that you're influenced by Lizzie Borden without telling me that you're influenced by Lizzie Borden. Like, just show Pearl, because like it's that idea of that older time. Obviously this takes place in like the World War I time, 1910. But the idea of like, a female who has the ability to have a better life. Because it also comes to fruition as well that even though her husband's out to war, he's very well off. He's not a poor guy. So they have the means to actually live a very fruitful life that they're not living for whatever reason, which isn't, I don't think that's not overly explained, in my opinion, as to why the draft is the draft. When the draft comes a calling, you're just kind of fucked. You have to go, regardless of like your social standings. But it's never really explained why, you know, her husband is so wealthy, for lack of a better term, and they're just not living in like Beverly Hills kind of a thing. So anyway, but she wants to be a star, like when Jennifer, like when Tiffany and Chucky wants to be Jennifer Tilly, I want to be Jennifer Tilly. I want to be a star. And then just like you pointed out, the blondes get the attention. That's what, at that times there was a very specific look to their stars and their actresses that they went for. And despite the fact that she put on this dancing display that might not have been seen the same way that she was envisioning it, maybe didn't translate to how the judges saw it. They didn't find her to be worth a damn. But yeah, then to turn on your stepsister who doesn't say she gets the part, she's basically kind of beating around the bush and either potentially lies or really doesn't get the part, but she just gets fucking chopped up and an alligator fed. So that alligator from X is eating large.
Yeah, there's a reason why in X that alligator is like 900 freaking feet long and big as fuck because it's been eating bodies for the last like 80 years. But yeah, I mean, I love like, the, just even the, like the, the mother and the, the mother, like, taking care of, her mother and father and them taking care of her invalid father and stuff like that throughout it. I love it even when, like I said, the stepsister, because, obviously they're, her husband, family obviously had some kind of money because you could tell that they're more of like the posh style where Pearl and her family are the more like living kind of off the land and kind of just living as much as they can. I love when they bring the pig and she's just like, yeah, we don't take charity. We're not we may be hurting, we may not be living the lifestyle we want to, but we're not, we're strong enough to not take any charity. And I love the fact they just leave that pig
Yeah, it's
sitting
just
out
leave it to
there,
rot.
just leaving it to rot the whole entire time. Yeah, and she just goes ape shit crazy, kills the stepsister. She's just on a you see that, okay, now I understand why she was as fucked up and crazy as she is, in X. And like I said, then you find out her kind of having this little fling with the projectionist of the movie
Yeah.
place that plays all that, and her being sexually, so there's the sexual activities of her and Pearl. But then, like I said, anybody that kind of gets in Pearl's way, of being who she wants to be, doesn't fare well in these movies, whether it be the Pearl or the X movie. Yeah, she has a wicked thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the playfulness in the beginning of the movie, and even the weirdness. So that kind of explains it too, where you see her go and talk to a scarecrow and
Yeah.
then bring the scarecrow down and then start riding the scarecrow and basically riding it to orgasm. And then it's like, okay, so yeah, like you said, so you see both sides of that in this Pearl movie, of her psychoticness and her ability to snap without
Yeah.
judgment really quick, and when she snaps, she just snaps to violence. She's
I
just,
mean, she burns her mother alive twice.
yeah. So like this, just the evilness inside of her and the snap, you got that. But then, like you said, you see that, she's got her husband that has been around for a while, so she's got her needs and she's gonna get herself off regardless of it's herself doing it, whether or not it's a, scarecrow doing it, or whether or not it's the projectionist. She's gonna get her means, and basically kind of explains of why, when she's older, she still has that sexual appetite and she still has that violent appetite that you saw in X. So I just love it. Like, that's why I said I love Pearl. I love the way that it was. Like, apparently, originally they said that they were, when they did Pearl, they actually wanted to do in black and white because they kind of wanted
Yeah.
to do it in the time period in the black and white. But apparently, the studio said that they didn't want to go that route, so that's why they went to the super extreme and went for the bright colors. I actually think the bright colors made it more interesting because it was kind of that, like, Wizard of Oz, where it's all of a sudden it's in black and white, and then when she gets to Oz, it's got that techno color and everything is just so bright, which is such a contrast to, X, where that's kind of grimy and dark and it's everything's kind of darker colors, and Pearl's so bright and obviously like annoyingly bright, where even they even said it was like he made it more bright than it should have been just to be annoying because of them not wanting to go that black and the more black and white kind of route towards it. But
even
yeah,
even
like
even in the two intros, Devil, like with the fact that X opens with like that small grainy shot that kind of widens out to a full one, but then they take advantage of like the barnyard doors to really do that Wizard of Oz effect where it just
yeah.
fully opens out to just brightness.
Yeah, exactly. And like you were saying earlier too, we're getting to the end of Pearl and we'll talk Maxine. Yeah, it definitely, like you said, it's I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying that Maxine is not even nearly as bad as Warlock 3,
Oh,
but
it's
in
not a
the
plummet
yeah,
in any way, like
but in a sense, yeah, it is the weaker of the three movies. And my first time seeing Maxine, I wouldn't go as far as saying I hated it. I definitely felt that it was the weaker of the three. I still now think it's the weaker of the three, but after watching it a couple times again, I've actually grown to like it a little bit more than when I first watched it. I was kind of like, oh, this is not saying it was shitty, but it was like, oh, it was such a huge down, huge letdown for how well X was and how much I loved Pearl. First time I saw Maxine, I was just like, I don't know, man. I just don't like it. But now that I've watched it a couple of times and then watched it again now, I do appreciate it a lot more and I do like it. Yeah, I'm still gonna say that it's definitely the weaker of the three. But that's regardless. I mean, I can watch that movie a million times and maybe like it more and more and more every time. But it's still never gonna get to the level of Pearl and X. And like I said, I like it. I love the fact that it's a continue. It is the continuation of of the X one, where X was filmed in 19 was a 1979 film, and this is now like 1985 now. So it's been like 6 years since the events of X, and she's kind of like you know, in the porn industry. She's made a couple movies now. She's that star, but she's like really a star only really in the porn industry.
Mhm.
And even when she's getting an opportunity to be in this movie, it's a horror film that's going to be a sequel of a one that they made before. It's called The Puritan. It's a very anti-religious kind of witch kind of burning kind of movie and stuff like that, where even when she goes onto the lot and every time, like, hey, she's like, I'm Maxine, the guy with the security guard's like, yes, you are, because everybody, of course, all the guys know who Maxine is because she's this big, porn star now. She's like, she's like the version of Debbie Does Dallas or something like
Yeah.
that. She
Deep
is that
throat.
yeah, she is that, that huge porn star of the time, you know what I mean? Like, maybe like, like some of the big ones that were out in in the 80s and the 70s and stuff like that. She was that main, that main girl that everybody knew, but she kind of wanted to, because of her wanting to be a superstar and feeling that she was a superstar, that she always wanted to be bigger and something bigger. So she knew she had to kind of get out of she's not going to stop doing the porn stuff, but she's going to get out of the of the industry and try to break into mainstream horror. And I love the fact that she goes to the audition and stuff like that, and they're expecting her. She's like, expecting her to be a normal porn star, and she does her reading, and she's crying, and they're like, "Holy shit, yeah, this chick can really act. She's really, really good. Yeah, we're gonna get her." And then, lo and behold, will you show us your tits real quick? And she's like, she's kind of, not that she's prude about it, because obviously she's done porn and shit like that. But she's just like, come on, I was hoping that I would not be, not that I'm against not showing them, but I'm kind of like, trying to get out of that having to show them. But she's just like, yeah, whatever, and shows her, shows her boobs real quick, and they're like, okay, I just love that where it's like, that she's even though she's gonna be in a horror film and she's gonna be maybe in this mainstream, they're gonna kind of take advantage of that aspect that she did porn. So like, kind of typecast her into those kind of roles like you saw in the 80s, especially in the 80s, the slasher films, we've talked about it before with some of the slasher films that you've chosen or people have chosen before, where it's like, how you make a slasher film in the 80s without any nudity is
Yeah.
beyond me, because that was the main thing, was just nudity. So it was just kind of funny that like even in that she was like, Really, even in this, I gotta have to show my tits. Okay, whatever. And then goes out in front of the people and says, "Yeah, you guys all better just go home because you bitches aren't gonna get this role. This role is mine." And I love the fact that it's filmed on the Warner Brothers or whatever the lot, Universal lot.
Yeah.
They got the house from you know from
Psycho.
Psycho 2 and the hotel and all that. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. Just I love that aspect of that too, where it's kind of that like back lot kind of Pee Wee Herman, Pee Wee's Big Adventure, where you're in the back lot of the studio.
Oh no, definitely. It's so cool. So many references. And also, of course, so many references to just like real life at that time. I mean, just mountains of cocaine. I love the fact that at one point when she officially becomes that star, you see her cutting up a line of cocaine with her fucking SAG card.
Yeah,
I was like, that's amazing.
you got like a
She's
big
using her
huge douche.
she's using her Screen Actors Guild card, her membership card to cut up her
Yeah,
cocaine.
so you got that big huge like goose thing or whatever like that. That's like a cookie jar that's just
Oh,
filled with mountains of cocaine.
yep. It's just so wild, man.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
you've got Kevin Bacon's character who's like just kind of that sleazy guy, you know. He's just that
Private
typical
dick.
that private dick, you know, that thing, and who just gets fucking car compact crushed as probably the top kill of the movie, where that he's just locked in his own car in a giant car press and just turned into a pancake.
Yeah,
And where
the atheist that asked for God's forgiveness right as he's getting crushed.
yeah, you know, in the because and they have everything like tying in, with like little throwbacks to Maxine, and Pearl's father as like the I refuse to live a life I don't deserve kind of a thing, that standard like quote, and all the little references like the pearl the Bella reference to sorry, the theta reference to not only to the gator but also to the poster that was
Yeah,
on the wall of the cinema back in Pearl, and like really really well thought out. One of my favorite parts that I always thought was also really interesting was the scene where like she's in where she's in the prosthetic, and all of the special effects bodies that are around, because she's getting just made up for the part, where they like are simply taking molds of her, but the special effects studio that she's in, all the various bodies, whatever, corpses or just effects, mannequins, however you want to call them, they're all her friends from X, but the ways that they died. You saw the
yeah,
you saw the one without a head. You saw the one with like a shotgun blast to their chest. You saw like the other one just in pieces. Like they were all like, and that was part of the scene, is because she's tripping and seeing these things, and it's reminding her of her like former cast members and like friends.
yeah, yeah. I love the fact that too. Throw into that with the girl. I can't remember her name right offhand, but the girl who's doing the special effects is actually Juliet Lewis's younger version of her from the Yellow Jacket. So I
Oh,
love that she was in that and stuff like that. But yeah, I love a little bit of those weird nods, like Pearl did with X, and you had those kind of little nods. There's actually another little Easter egg that eventually people will find out when they're watching Maxine, but maybe not remember that it was actually even previously shown in X. Because at the very end of X, when when they're going around and they're doing their investigating of like the place, the TV had like the TV evangelist, the guy that was the preacher that was talking about sin and everything's doing sin. And at the very end of it, he talks about they even took my daughter Maxine, and they show a picture of Maxine as a little girl. Fast forward to the to the when they make Maxine, you find out yeah she would the father, she's the Maxine that they were talking about. The father is is going around, and eventually when you find out that he's part of this cult kind of thing that's trying to like make people scared so that they can kind of go back to Jesus, and his families have lost their loved ones to sin and the porn industry and all that kind of stuff, and he's just kind of doing all this, and he's making it references to Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, which
Yes.
they have periodics of him killing, but then this other guy doing all that stuff, and you find out, yeah, eventually whenever she finds out who is coming after her with Kevin Bacon's character, you finally find out that it's the dad, and it's the preacher from the preacher from the TV series that was on there talking about it in Maxine, and that's what it was. He was just trying to bring her back into the fold, and I love the fact that, yeah, when he gets into that area, when all of a sudden like the cops are going and they have the shootout, man, I just love it, man. They're just taking everybody out and
They're
stuff
just
like that.
taking cultists just out, man.
Yeah, but the only part when it comes to the father, which people have noticed before too, and I guess it's a little bit of like nitpicking and kind of not really continuity errors. It's more of like a time period error, error in the thing. But when he goes, obviously in 1979, you have Maxine, X. Maxine was in that, but she survived. So you got to realize she's probably in her early 20s, maybe when X is coming around. So she was born. If this is 79, she was probably born in the mid 50s. We'll
Yeah.
say when she got so when they're doing the video of her dancing for her father and all that kind of stuff like that, it would have been in the early ages of film, and it
Yeah.
would have been in that late 50s to early 60s, and there wasn't any sound, so that reel of her dancing for her father, there would have never been any audio. So that was
Hmm.
the only gripe. It was like, yeah, kind of like, yeah, I get it, because it made sense to have that audio because of her, because of the mantra that she says and her dad says, which comes down to the very end, where like you were saying about being a star, and I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to back down. Nothing's going to stand in my kind of way. Kind of mantra that she has, that eventually, you know, right before she takes out her dad with that shotgun, right
Yeah.
as the news helicopters are all over her.
I mean, they're small. They're small things too. Yeah, it's like a time period thing, like you said. Where, but again, it's like it was also very close as well because that time frame wouldn't be too entirely off either from the same time that, like, for example, the Munsters and the Addams Family and Car 54, Where Are You would be on TV and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I
So
mean, like
there's
TV wise, I can understand, but then again,
yeah,
some
but
guy at
like
home
a
isn't
home
gonna.
movie, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I definitely get you on that for sure. But yeah, man, I mean, like, just like you said, yeah, Maxine is by no means the plummet that Warlock 3 was, which ultimately I'm sure the Fangs and Infernos and of us collectively also ultimately kind of know where this is going, and that's okay. But it definitely, yeah, it's for me, it's because it's as weird as it sounds, it's more of just that straight telling story where the other ones had so many more nuances and so many more little twists and turns, and not entirely like cliffhanger style and not so much like major, like, oh my god, like crazy twists. It was more proper explanations. It was, you had more of an ability to, I feel, really invest in the characters in X and Pearl, where now that they're established, I'll admit I felt, well, not so much for Maxine because you kind of knew that her backstory had already been put into play. So you overall kind of get it. But I really do feel like the new characters in Maxine that you were given for this movie, you it was a little they were it was just a little bit more weak. It was a little bit tougher to really get to know these characters because the characters that were offed in this movie were actually offed kind of quickly after meeting them, that you didn't really get to invest in the characters like you did in the first two movies. And I think that's really kind of one of the bigger downers for me because everybody knows how much I love backstory and I love character explanation and I love getting invested and stuff like that. So that was always kind of a thing for me when it came to this movie that hurt it a little bit was while it played out really well. And again, I love the comedy. I love the whole like, fuck, damn it, I'm trying to like become like a legit actress that's taken seriously. Fine. You know, the cutting up the mountains of coke with her SAG card, little stuff like that. You know, the continuation of the character. Love that. It didn't spread out enough
Yeah.
as the other movies did. So, you know, you just kind of, you know, it was a little bit you were cheapened a little bit on your experience just because of that. But again, absolutely not the plummet. Definitely a quality end to the trilogy. You know, but yeah, it's gonna be the low man on the totem pole in the trilogy. But Devil, my friend, how do you look at the X trilogy as an overall rating for the franchise on the obituaries?
I mean, like I said, yeah. Before getting into that, the only thing, like I said, I agree with you with the character wise. I do love the character of her best friend, the black guy that works at the video store. I thought they
True.
did good job on his character and you liking his character enough that when he does die, you kind of feel that when she runs through the barrier and goes after him and you realize you're like, oh shit, because he just reminded me of like everybody that I grew up, loving the horror films and loving the music and having the tattoos and the weirdness and that kind of stuff. I love that. Although, like I said, there were definitely some cool kills in Pearl and some cool kills in Maxine, or not Maxine, but in X. But I don't know, man. The one thing in Maxine that I think is probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen in any horror movie or genre, as far as like maybe not necessarily a kill, but you would wish you were dead, was when she fucking the guy that was trying to murder her and be the fake Night Stalker guy, when she fucking makes him take off his clothes and get
Oh,
on the ground and takes a heel to his balls and just destroys his ball sack. It's
yeah,
like, ooh, like I love that, but then I
that's
hated it,
true.
but
Just
I
fucking
loved it. It's just,
stripper heel style, dude.
yeah, I was like,
Stiletto
oh my
down.
god, that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I'm like, oh man, I love that. It was so great. But then the whole time I'm like, oh God, that's gotta hurt the giblets. But then again, like you said, he was, fake Night Stalker and thinking that he's gonna get this damsel in distress. And yeah, they may work for some girls, but Maxine's been fucking, trying to get killed by old people, so she doesn't give a fuck. And you fucked with the wrong person, put the wrong
Yeah.
person into the put the wrong person into the corner. You don't put baby in the corner. You don't put Maxine in the corner either.
Nope, absolutely, because she took out your ability to make it a triple X movie.
Yeah. So yeah, you're like I said, you may have not been like I said, I can't really consider it a kill, my greatest kill, because the guy probably more than likely didn't die. There's a possibility he could have died. He could have died from like loss of blood or some shit like that. But it's gonna be one of those ones where he's gonna wish he was dead because now he's got no balls. So,
Yes.
but anyway, yeah, like I said, when it comes to the whole franchise, like I said, Maxine, watching it the first time, versus now watching and even talking about it, I kind of enjoy it a little bit more. But yeah, like we said before, it's definitely the weakest of the three, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, you can kind of go, if you went from, Rob Zombie's, Devil's Rejects, House of Thousand Corpses, and Three from Hell. I mean,
Yeah.
to be completely honest, if you're gonna do three, I would say out of all those, that the strongest is Devil's Rejects, which we've already talked about that being the better sequel. If you're gonna put one of them as the weakest link, I would say Three from Hell is the weakest link, but it still doesn't mean that Three from Hell isn't a good movie. We love
Nope.
Three from Hell. We've met a bunch of actors and actresses from Three to Hell. We love
Yeah.
Three from Hell. So just because you're the weakest of the three doesn't necessarily always mean a bad thing. Sometimes it does, like in, not maybe not the Warlock case, but Witchboard, 3, yeah, you
Uh-huh.
definitely are the weakest link, goodbye on that one. So that, that one's definitely different. So Maxine definitely, everybody out there, yeah, we are, we might be shitting a little bit on Maxine, but it's
Yeah.
not nearly as bad as some other ones. But for me,
No.
I think this is cool. I think it's a new franchise that's kind of been done before, but not really done the way Ty has done it. I love the fact that, like I said, each movie is critically shot sort of in the time period of what those films would have been made if they were done at that time. So I love the stylistic of that. I love the fact that you get Mia Goth in 3 movies, and who doesn't love Mia Goth? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's awesome. You get her. I love the fact that she's kind of getting blown up now, and like you said, and it's one of those ones where you have a new kind of trilogy, a new film where people are dressing up. Cosplay is major. You got a lot of people who have dressed up like Maxine. I've seen Maxine. I've seen a lot of people dress up like Pearl. Pearl's definitely a lot of ones. Maybe not necessarily old Pearl, but Pearl from the second movie with the red dress and the axe and stuff like that. You definitely see a lot of that cosplay. And like I said, it's kind of like we said before with Terrifier. It's a newer franchise that's getting people excited about horror films, and it's cool that these kind of
Yep.
films are kind of getting into mainstream now and getting a little bit of that love, and people are now finally seeing the beauty of horror movies like we've had. So that's why, like I said, I mean, overall, like I said, X is definitely the grandeur of all of them. Like I said, I think just like Warlock, it's the better movie. I think overall, Pearl is definitely the I think my favorite of them, just because of the storyline. I
Yeah.
love how it was shot, but it's not as I don't think it's still as overall as strong as X. Because the X is kind of like that first one, it kind of just kind of hits you out of nowhere, kind of like, oh my god, kind of shit. And like I said, with Maxine and stuff like that, yeah, it brings the series down a little bit, but not too much. I mean, like I said, I mean, I love this trilogy, and I think it's just an awesome. They were planning on doing a fourth one at one point, but he was like, kind of like how everything ended, because originally it was going to always be a trilogy. Then he was thinking maybe doing a fourth film, but then he was like, you know what? I think it worked perfectly. I think everything is good, so we can just keep it as trilogy. So now that that's done, we don't have to worry about them adding any extra. Hopefully, maybe not adding any extra to that series. But anyway, like I said, for me, I'm definitely gonna give it a high marks. I think Ty is one of those new directors that, he's kind of hitting that that horror genre, and bringing it up, and he's kind of taking the mantle of like directors and stuff like that before him, like the old school, John Carpenter kind of movies, and then even taking that realm of Eli Roth, and kind of taking that shoulders off of Eli's shoulder, that weight off of Eli's shoulder, and kind of bringing that into the forefront of the new genre. So for me, I mean, like I said, even with the little bit of you know downness from Maxine, I mean, I gotta give this whole series an 8.
Yeah, man. No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Yeah, and again, it Maxine, it's a quality closing point, you know. And this isn't also the first time that we've discussed Mia Goth either. She's a mentioned alumnus of the V&D show with her appearance in Infinity Pool.
Yep.
So like, she's I'm sure gonna make other appearances as well. You're definitely right. Like, I like it on all of those points. I think it's a fresh take. Like what Ty's doing is very similar to like what I personally feel that Robert Eggers does very, very
Yep.
well. It's just that new they call it new school, but it's more like that individual style that's new and refreshing. And that's one of the reasons why I like Robert's movies so much, is despite the fact that they're not particularly high up on Mrs. Vamp's, preferred movies list, but those stylistic movies in The Witch and, Nosferatu and The Northman and Lighthouse are just very much my style in the way that they're shot and the story that's told. So anyway, But I know, man, I'm definitely with you. That was the number I kind of had in my head as well. I love the story. I love the story arc. Yeah, it's a quality start. It's got an upswing when it comes to the storytelling in the second movie, which sometimes can be very tricky to do. And then a little bit of a drop, but that's more along the lines of the fact that the story's been established. Now it's continuing it, updating it, and then ultimately closing it out, which is very, very difficult to make the original, then improve, and then ultimately climax still by going up. So that's the only reason why I'm like, yeah, I do think it's lower than the other ones, but like you said, totally not because it's a bad thing. It's just the natural arc of the story. I don't think was ever going to allow it to be the superior movie in the franchise. And that's just really what I think the breakdown is for that. So, Devil, my friend, I completely agree with you. 8.0 is definitely the way to go. So, that is the way that it is going to be there, Fangs and Infernos. Victory to the Devil in another franchise showdown. As with an 8.0, the X trilogy takes out Warlock at a 6.5. Now, Fangs and Infernos, I know this is going to look, especially when we publish it, like what we like to refer to as a flawless victory, which I'd like to say is not the case specifically when it comes to this one. Devil and I talked about that at the beginning of the episode. There are things in this particular showdown that were definitely going to be hindrances and, superior advantages when it came to this trilogy versus this trilogy. That's just the way it was. But there are very, very good and quality aspects of the Warlock movies for what it did in the late 80s and what it continued on in the 90s. It was just like what we agreed upon before. It's just unfortunately the third movie was just such a downer. It just lacked all the necessary punches to keep Warlock really up in the fight. So while it definitely has things in that franchise that I do think are very cool and definitely compete, and maybe even a couple cool, quirky little things that do have some advantages over the X trilogy, overall, as a story to be told, the way that it's shot and the acting overall, it's just overall gonna be stronger, and that's the way it shall be. That's the way it will stand for all of eternity. Again, an 8.0 for the X trilogy takes out Warlock at a 6.5. Make sure that you guys are shopping and looking very, very fine in your vampire and devilish attire. If you love what we do, we'd really love for you guys to not only support us, but also by doing that, you will support our friends Mark and Lizzie, as their website, Rock and Horror, is the only place that you can get Vampire and Devil merchandise exclusively. But also, for anybody who goes out to whether it be Salem or Baltimore, make sure that you guys are supporting independent businesses, especially museums, and keeping them afloat. So I definitely want to take a moment, since we mentioned the franchise a couple of times in our conversations today, that you're getting out and supporting our good friend John Kozik, who owns the Baltimore Witchboard Museum and the Salem Witchboard Museum. They're the only witchboard museums, the Ouija board museums in the country, completely dedicated. He's very, very, knowledgeable, knows everything. They're a very important part of his life, as well as the fact that he is also the treasurer of the Talking Board Historical Society as well. John is absolutely fantastic. Always takes care of me and Devil anytime that we're able to come and check out his events and come and check out his museums. But also, if you guys like to get your tea on, please make sure that you guys are checking out our friends in Brutalities. They've always got brand new flavors that are dropping, and they're just awesome, awesome people. We love them to death. And then, of course, if you like hot things like the Devil, he's such a fine looking gentleman. Make sure that you're visiting our friend Aaron using that awesome Vampire and Devil discount code for Coney Island Sauceries. Remember, they've got Slayer and all kinds of amazing sauces that they're involved in as well. And we love all of our various sponsors, and of course, shout outs, of course, to Twisted Vines, as well as the Buffalo Bill House as well. So that's going to be it for us when it comes to you guys, Fangs and Infernos, but we're going to come roaring back very, very soon. Horns up, Fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot.
Of course, the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampireanddevil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh yeah, you want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampireanddevil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampireanddevil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
What's up? It's the devil here with a new face for you kiddies out there. Anyway, we're going to continue talking about movies with the devil in it. This time we're going to talk about End of Days. Have you seen this? Oh yeah, gotta love this movie. Gotta love Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh yeah, and the Terminator is not the Doomer, it's the end of days. Anyway, you gotta love the portrayal of the devil in this one, Gabriel Ryan. Oh yeah, he comes in the movie, makes out with that guy's wife, pops the titty out, burns the place down, and it just destroys everything. Gotta love these movies when they were coming out in the late 90s. Everybody was afraid of how the world was gonna end. This movie, Stigmata, all those good stuff. Anyway, you should go check out End of Days. Oh, I love the end of that movie. Oh, he takes that guy, he's like, I'm gonna show you the end of days. And then puts his head backwards. The end of days must have been behind him. Anyways, go check out End of Days, because if not, the devil might come and check you out.
Devil, sometimes sequels just need to be that. Sequels. Continuous conversations, things about this, that, and other things. Possession, aliens, base fuckers, Ouija boards. So much that can be discussed in sequels. So let's do a sequel of our own, my friend, as we're going to revisit a previous showdown and have a little fun. What do you say, my friend? Let's talk about better sequels.
Oh yeah, you know what I mean? We did it, we like we said, we did it earlier last season when we did Texas Chainsaw 2 versus Devil Rejects, and some people, talk about those movies as being better sequels. Some people say it's blasphemy to tell you that, that a second movie can be better than a first movie, but we're gonna talk a little bit about that. And like I said, we're gonna pit up, the Conjuring 2, which we're all fans of the Conjuring, obviously, and all the subsequent other little spin-off series and stuff like that that they have about Ed and Lorraine Warren. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Conjuring 2, which some people may not agree with it being a better sequel, but then again, if you don't agree with it, then make your own podcast and talk about it. So anyway, we're going to talk about it being a better sequel, and then we're going to put it up against what is considered probably in the talks of everybody in the entire world. Like most people are kind of iffy about sequels being better, we're gonna talk about Aliens. And there's not too many people out there in the world that, not saying that they don't think that Alien is a good movie, but there's, not too many people out there have ever disagreed that Aliens is not. I mean, it might be. We'll talk a little bit about it, but it may be one of the greatest sequels ever in
Yes.
of any genre. It's up there. It's up there. It's just like it's just one of those movies that we consider a perfect movie almost to a point. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, that's the thing about when you talk about sequels, or even when we talk about, remakes or anything like that, you're always gonna have those conversations. People are gonna agree with you and not agree with you. How can you feel like the second one is better than the first movie? That's blasphemy and all that stuff like that. But that's what we do here. We like to shake those feathers and ruffle them and do all kinds of shit that we shouldn't be doing. So we're gonna talk about better sequels.
Absolutely, my friend. We are definitely going to get into that. So let's talk a little bit about The Conjuring. Why don't we start it off with that one? It's a more recent movie. Again, the Ed and Lorraine Warrens, the very, very well-known and real-life, you know, demon hunters, paranormal investigators, however you want to look at it. I've always been very, very high on the Conjuring series in general. In fact, the entire Conjuring universe itself, I'm a very, very big fan of. Like collectively from top to bottom. I'm an advocator for each specific part of that series and a defender of pretty much all of it. I think what James Wan does as a filmmaker is really stellar. I think it's very, very good. His directing style, his ability for cinematography, and coming off the things that kind of built him up to being involved as his own guy that's kind of steering the ship. I think he really does it very well. And when it comes to paranormal movies, I really do kind of feel that he does it better than most, if not better than everybody. Because there's things about what he does in this movie, as well as movies in general, where there's a lot of, cliches and expectations and normalities to what you expect in horror movies. And he has a very good way of setting up scenes where you are sitting there ready for it, ready to get it, and then it actually not happening. And then giving it to you either a little bit later or in a different way, which is a very, very hard concept to do correctly without it looking really, really campy. But anyway, I think Conjuring 2 is fantastic. Like I said, I love the Conjuring series. I think it started off great. My little mini part of the original Conjuring is there were things about the Conjuring movie, or the first movie, that I really did love. There were certain jump scares that I thought were so excellent. I thought they were really, really well done. Even just the simplicity behind them. And the main one that I highlight, and I'm gonna highlight, is when the mom is in a panic down in the basement, and she's running up the stairs, and she's sitting at the top of the stairs because she's locked down there, and she's hearing these noises, and then a set of hands come out right next to her head and clap. That's one of my favorite scenes, as well as a scene that I caught very quickly before it got the rest of the theater, which is where the whole family wakes up to this tapping noise, and they realize it's the little girl who's just kind of like a toy, who's like stuck in a corner, or like a walking toy that's just kind of, she's like walking into a cupboard and backing up and walking into a cupboard and backing up and walking into a cupboard, to where the dad kind of stops her, cradles her head, and takes her back. And as the camera's panning back, and like I said, I saw this right away, I realized there was an entity on top of the cabinet. And you see the camera just instantaneously leap forward to zoom in on that demon's face as it jumps down to attack the girl. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about it because that's not the movie we're discussing. But my point being that those two situations just made the theater erupt in screaming when I saw them. So anyway, I love the design of the way The Conjuring does with their movies and their jump scares. And I think The Conjuring is excellent that way. And again, I'd like to put this out for you, Fangs and Inferno. Stop fucking around with Ouija boards. Like, how many times do Devil and I have to say that? Stop fucking around with things you don't understand. Because this movie, like other ones before it, like The Exorcist, like things like that, start off with that Ouija board, feel. opening up. The movie's based around the main spiritual entity of an old man who's trapped in this apartment, who's basically tormenting this family. But also, as my closing thought on this, my friend, before I kick it over to you, Devil, is that I love the fact that the movie brings in as a demonic entity some a particular character that I'm very passionate about, and I've heard that they were going to do a movie. Have since heard that they've scrapped that movie, which has me incredibly pissed off. But man, do I love the demonic entity, the Crooked Man. I think it's so cool. I think the idea of the character is so awesome, and I really, really hope that they change their mind down the road, but also do something good and not stupid and shitty. But yes, it's based around this elderly man trapped in his apartment that is absolutely torturing this family, but ties in with the original tapes, the things that are real life cases involving things like the Amityville house.
Yeah, I mean that's what I like about that. Like in this one, like you had that first Conjuring, which was cool. I like the story. You get a little bit of that Annabelle character at the very end of it. You hear about an Amityville. Them going to that. I like how it goes into like them basically getting done doing the Amityville thing, and then all of a sudden like they get the notoriety of being like this big thing, and all of a sudden. The one thing I love about this movie though, like we talked about it when we talked about franchises with Poltergeist. You have the little girl, getting scooted around throughout the whole time, and the parents are like, "Ah, yee, hoo, hoo, hoo. Look, the furniture's getting all the thing." I love this movie where the infield ghost man. They're just like, nope, get the fuck out of this house. And they go over to the neighbors. They're like, yeah, we're not playing around, man. Like, nope, we're getting out of this house to begin with. And like I said, you're talking about the little jump scares and the things that are stuff like that. I mean, it did bring a character that obviously they played a little bit more, but with the nun character and stuff like that. And obviously, there's been, a couple more conjurings after this, and then now they have that new one that's getting ready to come out, which they kind of tease a little bit in this because she's obviously getting scared. She's losing her faith and stuff like that, and she sees like images of her husband dying and stuff like that. So she's kind of maybe thinking about they're second guessing whether or not they want to do this stuff anymore. And basically, like this new Conjuring that's coming out called Last Rites is basically the reason. It's their last case that they ever did. It's the reason why they stopped doing what they did, and they stopped doing it at a pretty. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying they were young, but there's as many years as they were doing this paranormal stuff. It's been so many years after that they didn't do this paranormal stuff because of all that. But like I said, that's why I love about the Conjuring stuff, and especially with a lot of it coming out. It's very controversial, especially this story in general anyway, because there's a lot of stories that are being told and then not being told that are actually factual stuff too. Because
Yes.
like even in this movie with the cops, the cops there at the one point the cops were in the house while shit was happening, and there were recordings of these cops saying that they saw stuff moving and that they couldn't explain. But then later there's other recordings of those cops saying they didn't see anything and stuff like that. Then there's obviously a lot, if you look into the history of it, a lot of stuff that the girls have, they've said that a lot of the stuff they did was stuff that they came out and did that was faking, like the floating in air, like them just basically it was just them jumping off of a bed and catching a picture and making it look like it. Apparently, like the demonic voice, the little girl found out that she can use her, parts of her vocal cords that you kind of use when you have strep throat. So she was able to get into that to make herself sound a lot lower than what she was supposed to talk. So there's a lot of stuff in this, like I said, especially with The Conjuring, even like any of those kind of movies. A lot of people, some people will believe it's like the Amityville thing, and whether or not you believe, even the Annabelle, whether or not you believe in the Annabelle doll and stuff like that, you know what I mean, with not opening it and doing all this stuff like that. I love it because it's a lot of times where you hear a lot of this stuff where it's like, yeah, some people don't believe in it, and then it's like, yeah, but then again, it's like, okay, you may not believe in it, but are you gonna put your money where your mouth is and go see the Annabelle and open it up and try to do something? Yeah, let me see you try to do that. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you might not believe in it, but it's it, it's enough out there where they're like, yeah, you might not believe in it, but I'm still not going to test it whether or not it's true or not. And that's what, yeah, like I said, even with this movie, but like I said, going into the actual movie, I always found, like I said, like you said, I found this one is a better movie just because I like the story better. I like the whole entire thing better. I love the imagery and the way that Ed and Lorraine are working with each other and working with these other people. You have the skeptic kind of in the background, not believing it and things like that, where I just thought it was a cool movie. I thought it was just a well done. You know what I mean? It's just one of those ones where it's like, man, there's a lot of crazy shit going down, and I mean, but they stuck it in there, and like you said, with the crooked man, and just that whole like little toy that moved around and did the talk about the crooked man. I was like, yeah, that stuff was kind of cool. It's kind of creepy and like enough where it's like, yeah, it's like a lot of crazy shit going down, you know what I mean? And and like and even some stuff with it. You're talking about the old man that died. For people who might not know, whether or not this is true or not and whether you believe or not, but it's kind of coincidental that eventually the mother lived there for years and years and years and years later. And when the mom died, she actually died in the same chair that the old man died in. So it's kind of creepy, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I was like, where did you find this furniture? I don't know. I'm like, I'm like, yes, oh, there's some old man died on it. I'm like, who keeps a couch or a chair or something that somebody died in that previously used to live there? That's why you get rid of that shit. And like you said, with the Ouija boards, even their fake shitty one, even though in this instance the Ouija board really had nothing to do anything.
Yeah.
It was the chair that was bad. But yeah, it's like get
Stop
it,
fucking
don't
around.
fuck around with that shit, you know what I mean? Even if you draw one and just make one on a thing, yeah, it may, yeah, like I said, I've always joked around about it, especially with, when people get the regular Ouija boards and things like that, the Milton Bradley ones and shit like that. I was like, yeah, my Monopoly board likes to conjure some demons once in a while too.
No, absolutely. But and one of the things though, Devil, that I've also always found very, very strong when it came to this movie is I really do like the characters specifically about this movie. And there's a lot of great things about the characters and aliens that we're definitely going to talk about because they're amazing characters as well. But the thing I also really like about this, the characters in this movie, and again, this movie stylistically and the history of how this became a movie is drastically different than Aliens. You really get into the characters of this movie on a real personal like level. And again, I'll put this out there because we're going to discuss it shortly anyway. You get very invested with Ripley's character in Aliens as well because there's a family tie-in right off the bat that we're going to discuss that absolutely makes you feel more tied to that character. With this movie, you really feel tied in this family on a slightly different type of level, a little bit more real level, because of the type of movie, because you really do start to kind of feel for this family. Because again, there's such a history of paranormal situations, of families just crumbling themselves because some family members see it this way, others see it this way. But the fact that you feel for them, you're like, man, I am so sorry that they're going through this. Like, this is awful. This has got to be so stressful and so draining and just so completely awful. And the fact that they're living in this house that has this horrible history that's clearly coming in. Again, there is a real documented sense of realism to this. And it's a very, very cool thing. And a really well done movie. And there's a lot of strength in movies like this that take the time. And again, Hollywood money helps with that. Don't get me wrong. I feel that you and I could actually do a very quality paranormal movie if you and I wanted to do one together. But again, if we don't have Hollywood money backing us, it's a little tricky when it comes to certain shots, certain effects, certain things like that. But overall, I really love the development of the characters in this movie and the overall story that it tells, because you have that realism to it, because these are completely documented stories. And the things that I love so much about things like The Conjuring, like The Nun, and like Annabelle, and even to the same degree, Curse of La Llorona, which is in this universe as well, is you can watch this movie and then you can actually go do research on the history of this movie, like what this movie's based off of, because it's all based on real documented events that also have a lot of paperwork and a paper trail behind it to read up on. And there's so much out there when it comes to Ed and Lorraine. So I love the fact that this movie gives you the ability to do more on your own time, which I think is a very, very cool aspect of this. And ultimately in that type of Hollywood feel to it, it comes to a relatively safe closure to it. But the other thing too, specifically with Ed and Lorraine, that I love about this movie is they touch on it and you get into it in the first movie. You really get into the love and self-protection that this husband and wife have for each other. And it's very strong in this movie. And that's something I really like about the way that James put it out there with his directing, to make you feel also specifically for Ed and Lorraine as a love factor, as opposed to just like, yeah, we got these two characters who just claim to be know-it-alls that are just going to roll up into this movie. No, not only just the family, I feel you get very invested in Ed and Lorraine's love and their marriage as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about, especially with Ed, with Ed and Lorraine. Like I said, anybody who's interested in paranormal and that kind of stuff like that. I mean, Ed and Lorraine are like basically like the, pop icons. They're the main people that you want to learn about this stuff like that. Because I like even in this movie, the one guy asked him like, how many times have you done? How many of these? He's like, cases. Yeah, we've done hundreds. We've done thousands of these. They don't always play out. A lot of times, what I mean, because they come in as a as people who believe in the paranormal, but they come in as skeptics themselves too. You know what I mean? They're not. They know that people are gonna come out and try to do this and try to fake this and fake that too. So, like especially when they started getting that notoriety when they did the Amityville house. They started getting that notoriety and people kind of knew who they were, and now they're like the big ones. So of course, they got to be a little bit more interesting. So it'd be cool to see. I mean, I know that this is going to be the last one that they're probably going to make, but it's kind of cool that they did that. I mean, I'd like to see some. I mean, I'd like to just see like a movie, especially because like you see in The Conjuring, at the end of The Conjuring Conjuring 2, when he goes down into what's known as the museum, which no, unfortunately now is not around. It's basically like, but they still have the items for all the stuff, but basically the basement is basically what was a museum of all the stuff that they've taken from cases and stuff like that, and everything in there has been possessed or have been used for stuff like that. And people go, oh my god, that, like, even with the museum, they're like, oh my god, I can't believe they let people go down there and visit and stuff like that. And it's like, I was like, trust me, if they, other than the Annabelle stuff and the stuff that's locked up, if they really felt like it was going to harm anybody, they're obviously not going to allow someone to go. Yeah, these things might be possessed, but it's cool. It'd be cool to see like them make like a, I don't know, like movie. I don't know how they would do it, but like a movie that would show like 5-10 minutes of like all the cases and stuff like that, of how they got these cool little, because whenever you see him putting the stuff down and he's moving other little things around, there's some cool little knickknacks and cool things. You're like, oh, I wonder what that was from. Like, that's cool. But I mean, if you know a little bit about if you know about the Warrens, then you kind of know what some of those trinkets were. But it'd be, for people who might not know them that much and only really know them from the series, you're kind of like, oh, this and this and that. And then I mean, like I said, the only downfall that I've ever had with The Conjuring, like I said, I love the Conjuring movies. They're pretty much the only ones I've ever really liked. I've never really got really big into the Annabelle and the Nun movies, and I did like the well, however you say it, the Case of the Lorna or whatever. I did
Yeah,
like that one.
I'm
I thought,
terrible at pronouncing it too, Devil. I just call
yeah.
it La Llorona.
Yeah, yeah, I did like that one, and like I said, I'm not going to go as far as saying I hated the nuns and the Annabelle movies. They're fine.
Yes.
I don't find them as strong as I like the Conjuring movies. I've always been more of that. My only beef with the Conjuring movies, which I understand, I just kind of wish that we would have had the rights to the real Annabelle, and we would have gotten the Raggedy Ann, because the Raggedy Ann doll is just so much creepier
It
than
is.
the Annabelle that they made. I understand Raggedy Ann was not the people who own the rights to the Raggedy Ann dolls does not want that notoriety any more than they already have. So they
Yeah.
don't definitely not going to allow Hollywood to kind of like boom. But then again, they did miss out on a point, because how many people have gone out and bought those Annabelle dolls? How much money? You gotta realize, man, if Raggedy Ann would have, the people that own that, or whoever, Mattel or whoever, I'm not sure. I think Mattel might own, but whoever owns them would have sold a shit ton of Raggedy Ann dolls. But
Yeah.
they would have made millions off of that movie. I felt like they felt like it was gonna hurt them more, because they didn't
Yeah.
want that notoriety of these dolls being considered part of this occult kind of thing. But I think they dug themselves shot themselves in the foot on that one, because yeah, especially horror fans and us liking our collectibles and things like that would have been
Mhm.
like, hell yeah, man, I'm buying me a freaking doll too. I'm buying me and some people have gone out and have bought them and stuff. I can guarantee their sales definitely went up a little bit, but I think they probably after that they were like, fuck, these people are buying that are buying these Raggedy Ann dolls, even though it wasn't in the movie, because they're like you said, you can watch these movies and then go on Google and research and find out about that stuff. And if you're watching the first Conjuring and you see that Annabelle doll and you're like, oh, that's cool, and then all of a sudden you look on Google and you're like, oh shit, it was a Raggedy Ann doll. I remember
Yeah.
having one of those as a kid. If you were a kid growing up in the anywhere from the 70s to like the late 80s, you more than likely probably at one point had a Raggedy Ann doll. So it's like people probably, like I said, people were buying them, but they're like, oh shit, man, we should have licensed that shit. We would have made even more.
Well, so Devil, it's funny that you should you bring this up because I want to I'll make a point of like agreeing with that point that you made right before we get into the obituaries. So for Fangs and Infernos, anybody who's not familiar is that Devil, like myself, has a split personality, and said split personality got to have a conversation with the actress Vera's husband. With it came to Devil's personalities music journalism that he does, and they had a conversation about that. And the reason that I bring that up, so go check that out on Empire Extreme, is that Vampire has a split personality too, and he does a side music gig as well in a show called The Metal Summit. And he was fortunate enough to have a conversation with the late great Tawny Katane. And the reason I brought that up is they had a lot of conversations about Witchboard, because at the time of that interview, it was actually Witchboard's anniversary. I forget exactly what you like which year of anniversary it was, but I think it was something around like the 35th anniversary. Um, anyway, she had addressed on that interview that Hasbro would not allow them to use them and their name in the Witchboard movie, despite the fact that that was the first real pop culture Hollywood film dedicated to Ouija boards. Of course, you had a Ouija board in The Exorcist. Anybody who's familiar with The Exorcist or is a fan knows that. But this is the first movie that was specifically dedicated to witch boards, Ouija boards, spirit boards, talking boards. Anyway, she had mentioned on the interview that Hasbro actually got in touch with the producers or the actors and actresses, whoever, Kevin, the director, whoever it was, and apologized for not allowing them to use that. And that always blew him away when they had that conversation, that man, you got a major corporation to apologize. The idea of that is insane. And I think that's ultimately because Hasbro really, really realized that they fucked up on that product placement, where I can understand, and so could he, and so did Tawny, on not wanting to have that necessary recognition, but then understanding where a mistake was made. And also on that note, Reese's Pieces was a beneficiary of that, because I believe that M&M's or Skittles was originally offered the candy gig for ET, and they
Yeah,
passed. They didn't want it. And Reese's Pieces was like, sure. And that led to an explosion in Reese's Pieces sales after ET came out and had such a success. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up, Devil, because I thought that was a really, really cool point, to where there are multiple cases, just like you addressed, of, mistakes made by companies thinking that they're doing right. And I understand where they were coming from, but sometimes it's just better to just let something go. Because as a young vampire back in the day, I wasn't necessarily gonna want a Raggedy Ann doll personally. It's like, oh man, I don't want that. But
these
if
are for
I
girls.
knew that like Raggedy Ann dolls included demon possession, that really might have changed my tune on whether or not I would have wanted my parents to get me one, as opposed to getting me a Cabbage Patch doll. So
Yeah.
sometimes, guys and girls and fangs and infernos, sometimes it's better off letting your brand be in something, regardless of what may or may not happen, because you never totally know. But anyway, yes, on to the obituaries as we prepare to talk about aliens. But let's rank how we feel about Conjuring 2. I'll keep it really simple because I really plugged it pretty hard at the beginning of the review, so I'll just simply circle back around. I really love this movie. I love this series. I love this franchise. I love this entire universe. Conjuring, like you said, though, is by far the strongest part of the universe. But I really do love the direction they went coming off of the first Conjuring movie. I thought the first one was solid. I thought this movie was great. I liked the story behind it. I felt the character development and your ability to feel for them is much stronger, because again, this is also based off real stories, real documented situations. That I love the fact that it gives a Fang and an Inferno the ability to want to do more research on them. And again, Ed and Lorraine are completely real people, very, very heavily documented people. And I love that this is not just one of those campy, based off true events. They really, I feel, do a very good job sticking to what story they're telling and what documented footage they have. Of course, there is a certain amount of Hollywood to this, but that's going to happen, especially when you've got a major blockbuster release. You're just going to kind of have to take that pill and just kind of eat take your medicine, just kind of have to eat that, whatever. I do think the movie's really strong. I love Ed and Lorraine's continued progression. I love the focus on the love that's in their marriage and the fact they look out for each other, especially Ed looking after Lorraine, because Lorraine's the one with the powers. And overall, I thought this was just an incredibly strong movie, and definitely a step up from The Conjuring, which is why I felt so good about it as the movie I wanted to talk about in our second, our sequel to better sequels. I'm strong on this one, Devil. I give it an 8.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely got to agree with you on that. I love the fact that, I thought the actors and actresses with Vera and I'm drawing a blank on the guy who
Patrick.
plays Patrick. Yeah, yeah. I thought they played really good, especially Vera. She looks like, even just down to, like you said, just the down the details in it, where a lot of the outfits that Lorraine was wearing when she was doing a lot of these stuff she's wearing in these movies and stuff like that, down to the details of, like, when they're doing the interview where in the Conjuring 2, they're making it where they're making the girl put the water in her mouth and turning, they play that, but then when the credits are rolling, they show you some of the stuff, the real stuff, and it's exactly how it was. A lot of the stuff, there's, you can definitely tell that, the like James Wan and those guys have really worked really well with looking at like what happened and stuff like that, and kind of making it about as seamless as you can. Like you said, I mean, definitely Hollywood's gonna blow it up a little bit more. Of course, they're gonna, they're gonna exaggerate stuff more. I mean, then again, like I said, with the argument of, with whether or not you believe or not. I mean, some
Yeah.
people will believe that everything in this movies are just is all fake, and none of this really happened. And some people will take it to truth that, you know, a lot of it happened or a lot of stuff. It really depends, it really depends on, your person and how you feel about, the afterlife and paranormal stuff and things like that. So I love, like I said, I love how it ties everything in. Like I said, I think as far as I believe there's three Conjurings now because I think the last right's
Yeah.
four. So out of the three, I still think that this one is the strongest of the three so far. But I think that last right one, just the way that it kind of looks in the previews, might be a good, really good one. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. But like I said, I mean, I agree with you. I think 8.0 is pretty good for The Conjuring because, like I said, when you put all of them in the series, I mean, it's just a good series, and like I said, I love the fact that
Yeah.
it's based off of real people and things like that. And like I said, not that's not saying that The Conjuring one wasn't good. We still love The Conjuring,
Yeah.
but I do feel that that the direction and just the way that the movie was and the storyline and just the ability to grow as like a director and a writer and all that kind of even as the actors them playing Ed and Lorraine, they felt more organic than they did in the first one. I think it was just that time of being in this character. Now that they've done this for the second time, they've kind of filled the characters a little bit more than they might have in the first time they played them. So yeah, I definitely agree with 8.0 as being a good solid marker for Conjuring 2.
Right on, brother. Absolutely. Now, this is going to be a great conversation as well because, like, coming off the first season when we did our better sequels originally, I mean, that was a fun and solid one to open up with the Devil's Rejects simply slightly out nudging Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but what we still called a friendly fatality because the fact of the matter is we don't have the Devil's Rejects without Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I said that on the episode. You said that on the episode. Rob Zombie could have been sitting with us, and I guarantee you he would have said that. Now, the thing that's really cool, and the reason I precursor that into this is that, dude, might people might genuinely struggle, and there might not be a stronger case for what might be considered the gold standard of a better sequel. Now, when it comes to the final comparisons of the two movies, depending on how we rank it, there's some stuff that I've held that we can discuss depending on the rankings when it comes to Conjuring 2 versus Aliens. But Aliens is very dominantly pretty widely widely considered the top of a better sequel. Now, whether fans like it more than Alien, there's going to be some subject to that because you're going to get a lot of people that are like, if you ask them on Monday which movie they like, they might say Aliens. You ask them again on Wednesday, they might say Alien because these movies are very, very tied in, just like we're about to discuss. But anyway, dude, kick it off, Devil. Aliens is so strong for that better sequel, and people hold it in such high regard.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna go. Like I said, to me, I believe that Aliens is probably about as great as a movie as you're gonna get, regardless of whether or not, like you said, what if sequel wise or not. So my only thing that I say, and I always kind of precursor this. I mean, I guess it really depends if you're talking about horror. If you're talking
Yeah.
about a straight up horror movie, Alien is definitely more of a horror film. Not that there's not horrific stuff in Aliens, but Aliens is just that more that grown up more one. It's got everything that you would want in a movie. It's got that body horror. It's got that horror aspect to it. There's some cool ass kills in this movie. There's some disgusting shit in this movie. But it also has got that action packed, shoot 'em up, bang, 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 nonstop into it. It's got a little bit of that drama into it. It's got that like, you know, corporate greed and that corporate sleaze like a Paul
Yeah.
Reiser, and that, how, companies really don't give a shit about anybody. They just want that money or that dollar or that product. They don't give a crap about about the little people at all. And then it's got, you have all that, and it's got one of the great, probably one of the movies that you would not really expect it when it comes to it, because it's not considered. We've talked about, horror comedies with like Shaun of the Dead and those kind of Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, where those ones are ployed as being a horror movie, but also that comedy. I will put Aliens up with all those as that same standard of just being a comedy movie too. That movie is just funny as shit. I mean,
Oh,
I,
dude.
I mean,
Dude, Bill
shout out to
Paxton
Bill. Yeah,
alone,
shout
Devil.
out to Bill Paxton. R.I.P. Bill Paxton. Dude, his character alone is the greatest, one of the greatest characters of all time.
I know it's not the right movie, but it was right next to me, and it's the closest thing
Yeah.
I could grab to a Bill Paxton.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just his character alone is one of the greatest characters ever wrote in just cinema. It's just to the point where he's like, even in the beginning of the movie, he's like, who do I gotta get out of it? Who do I gotta talk to get out of this chicken shit excitement? To the fact, once shit's going bad, man, no way, man, game over, man. Yeah, man, we're fucked. And just throughout the whole entire movie, he's making you laugh while people are getting killed and aliens are, oozing, their blood and their acid blood the whole entire time. You're just laughing the whole time, man. He's like, "Oh no, man, I don't know where the hell you were, but we just got our asses kicked."
Devil Bill has this amazing thing in the movie of writing this line where you go from watching him in certain scenes and being like, God, his acting so good, to watching him in other scenes and being like, he's overacting as fuck.
Yeah. I mean, and then, like I said, then you just have the extra. I mean, that's like I said. There's so much good stuff. You got Bill Paxton. You got you have Sigourney Weaver. Reprising her role as Ripley. And in the first movie, yeah, she's that girl kind of guy. And she comes kind of, it's sort of being a badass at the end of Alien, but not really. She's a fucking major badass in this movie. I mean, just even in the beginning where she goes up to him and is like, "Hey, man, I'm getting bored doing shit." She's like, "I got a class, class A. I can use those loaders." And she starts getting in the thing, moves those, and even the two guys were like, "Holy shit." She actually is pretty good at this. Okay, yeah, put it in Doc 12, or whatever like that. To the point where, yeah, when she's just going after, she learns the gun and she's going after, and then you have the queen and she's just fucking head to head with her. Like Sigourney Weaver, I put that character between her and Linda Hamilton's character from Terminator 2 as probably like the best two badass women in like motion pictures in general. Those
Yeah.
two are just fucking just kicking ass and taking names. And then, like you said, then you've got, Lance. We love Lance Hankerson, playing the android and doing the finger game throughout the whole entire time, which a lot of people don't realize. Although they did speed it up a little bit, that actually was him doing it. He actually knows how does that trick pretty well and stuff like that. But I mean, like I said, I mean, it's got everything you want in this movie. Like I said, it's got blood and guts. It's got the humor. It's got sex jokes where like Bill Paxton's character goes to Vasquez like, "Anybody ever mistake you as a man?" She's like, "No, but have they for you?" Yeah, to the point where we don't want any the live ammo. Whoop, let me pull this live ammo out and start fucking shooting some people.
Oh no, absolutely, dude, for sure. And that's the other thing too. Like you're totally right with a lot of that stuff, man. And like, I mean, that corporate greed, that corporate sleaze, like, dude, that head of literally called the company or the corporation. That's kind of when you know that like they're just corporate greed and sleaze. When you have a powerful company that doesn't even have a name, they're just known as the company or the corporation. Like that's fucking scary, dude. But at the same time, I really admired the acting behind. I forget the actor's name off the top of my head, but I really admire the acting of the head corporate guy because I
Paul
was like,
Reiser.
thank you.
Paul Reiser from Mad About You.
Yes, because dude, that dude took so much time to craft being such a fucking dick that
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Paul is like genuinely, he took the time. Whatever training methods he used or whatever movies or TV shows he watched to get inspiration, I'm like, man, this dude genuinely took the time to learn how to be such a fucking twat that like I really kind of got to admire the asshole that he was in that movie. But no, I think that was that's I loved his character in that movie for those reasons. You're 100% right on, Sigourney and Linda. I'll even casually throw Mila Jovovich because of Resident Evil into there because there really is a certain amount of badass to her. But with that being more of a semi more recent franchise, based off the video games, of course. And I'm not knocking Mila in this because I really did like her performance and her ability to be a badass. But absolutely, like Sigourney Weaver, Linda Hamilton, those are your gun wielding, knife toting, don't fuck with me, like top bitches, like 100% when it comes to like cinematic female heroism. I love that for sure. And yeah, but also when it comes to the movie getting out of the corporation part, you also then learn, and that's what I kind of talked and mentioned casually in Conjuring, was you get this side of Sigourney of Ripley that you learn that because this movie takes place nearly 60 years in the future, her daughter that you learn about that she had back in the day has since just simply lived her life and passed. She wasn't murdered. There was nothing sinister or devastating about the death of Ripley's child, other than the fact that she's cryogenically frozen and now is, living this new life again in the future, other than the fact that her daughter's life has simply come and gone. And there's nothing I can really say to be all like, oh, but there was this and then there was that and she was wronged in this way. No, sometimes you just got to accept that nobody's wronged in any facet. Their life just simply comes and goes. And that was something that I found so interesting about the character development in Ripley, that it's not the first time, nor will it be the last, that you tie in the death of a child to a character. You know, they do that in The Punisher, but this is nothing more than the fact that while she is sleeping, her, her daughter's life just comes and goes. That's just simply a normal person's life. And that's a crazy thing and a crazy concept for them to tackle, in the 80s, coming as the sequel of a movie that was actually in the 70s. But I loved that ability for you to get involved in Sigourney's personal growth and the understanding of her character, ultimately leaning into, of course, the understandable and almost predictable attachment that she got to Newt.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I said, in the Newt's character is so great because I like that too, where it's like, all these people, all these badass Marines are shooting people and they're talking about getting their asses kicked. You're like, again with Bill Paxton going, man, game over, man. And they're like,
Game
yeah, like
over, game over, man.
they're like, yeah, man, this little girl's lasted, all this time, and she's like doesn't have any weapons and no formal training. So it's like, you got to, you give it up for her character and that, like I said, you can definitely feel like you said, that loss of her child, Ripley's child, because of being in, the in the deep sleep and being, from the, from space traveling and all that kind of stuff like that, to now like she's kind of wanting to become once she sees Newt, she kind of becomes that motherly figure to her, where I like it whenever she's like giving her the hot chocolate and spills a little bit on her face and wipes her face and it's like, oh, we made a clean spot, we might as well do the rest. So so much mom jokes. And then the little girl stills the stove throughout the movie, where she does the thumbs up, and then of course every time they say affirmative, she's like affirmative. You hear about her, her story and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just funny too because we're talking about with the two badasses and stuff like that with Linda Hamilton and Sigourney Weaver and in Aliens. It ties in with the guy who directed this, with James Cameron. You know what I mean?
Cameron.
He brings out the badass in a lot of women, and that's the cool thing about Aliens. Like I said, you can look at the movie. You have Alien, which I still love. I'm a huge fan of Aliens 3. I still think it's a good movie. I mean, yeah, does it have its faults? Yes, but I still think it's a fun movie. It's one of those ones that
It
I'll
is.
die on the hill for, that I actually enjoy. Aliens, 4, yeah, there's a thing that I gotta talk about it, and this is like a, cue to Hollywood. If you make a movie and it's gonna be a sequel, do not make it called Resurrection. And that's a ploy out to Terrifier guys. Damien, if you decide to do a 5 or a 6 and or whatever of Terrifier, do not name it Resurrection.
No,
Resurrection will be the death of it.
no
Halloween's worst
resurrection.
movie. Yeah, Halloween's worst movie is Resurrection. Alien's worst movie is Resurrection. So anyway, like I said, I mean, I always love that. And then, like you said, you get into it, you find out a little bit more about these, the xenomorphs and their badass and how much they camouflage each other while they're on the ceilings and
Yeah.
coming out. And as I said, you only had the one xenomorph in
Yep.
Aliens. This one, you got all that. You got the pods coming out. You got the face huggers more in this. And then you see the ultimate badass and the queen, and she's just like fucking just taking names. I love the queen. I have the queen as one of my models of toys that I've always loved. I always thought that was just badass, where she's just like, she's getting fucked up, and she just rips her belly open, starts going after Sigourney Weaver. And it's got to be one of the coolest, like, you're gonna say like boss fights or bitch fights, because it's, ultimately it's a female character and a strong female character of Ripley, and then you have this queen who's a strong female character in the xenomorph world, and they're kind of going at each other. And that fight scene that they go at, when they're going at each other, and obviously the line, "Get away from her, you bitch!" Everybody loves that one. But yeah, man, her going after, and this, I just love the fact that the little mouth that comes out is almost getting to Ripley. It's just one of the coolest fights in the world. And then ultimately, our boy Lance gets split in half, and I love the fact that they do add him into Alien 3, so it's kind of cool to have him back for a minute. But yeah, I just love the fact. I mean, just like I said, just all the cues and things like that. With her being paranoid about the android because the Sith, the android from the first one that went crazy. It's like everything about this movie. Like I said, Aliens, just in general. I mean, I will die on the hill for this, as like I said, just being one of the greatest movies just ever as far as sequels. Which, like I said, yeah, I mean, we talked about James Cameron. I'm a huge Terminator fan, but I still think Terminator 2 is still a better movie. I would put that up. I mean, Terminator 1 is a more complex movie. I think Terminator 2 is a more fun movie, and
Definitely.
it's definitely more entertaining. But that's how I feel with Aliens. It's just like one of those ones where it's like, it's just like I said, it's got everything that you want in a movie. Like I said, it's got blood and guts and horror and sci-fi. It's got action comedy. It's got suspense and drama. It's got a little bit of love scenes, with Michael Baine's character and Sigourney kind of getting a little close and close to each other towards the end of
Yeah.
the movie.
No, absolutely, Devil. And you definitely have me and Mrs. Vamp on your side as well when it comes to Terminator 2, for sure. It's so fun. It's so great. We understand the back and forth of it, but Terminator 2 is just so great. In fact, when you and I actually met Edward Furlong not that long ago, if not for the fact that, the Fangs and Infernos, and you, of course, know me and the Crow franchise. We're not going to talk specific movies right now. That could be a fun episode in the future. You know what? We might have to visit that. But they all know me and the Crow as a franchise, you know, needed to get him on my franchise poster. And of course, because you and I, who not only interviewed him as a V&D alumni with James DeBello, I already had a Detroit Rock City picture of all the kids from Detroit Rock City chain signed by James. Had to get Edward on that. But my point being, of course, had we, meeting Edward Furlong, he would have been right there on our Terminator 2 stuff, 100%, because that movie is just so awesome. And, and James Cameron just has a really, really great knack when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, Devil, overall, I mean, Aliens is such a solid movie. It's so good. And the one thing that I'll even say, and I'll reiterate this in a moment if needed when it comes to how we rank things officially, is that the one thing I do love about Aliens is that movie has an incredibly strong rewatchability to it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones where you can watch it again, just rewatch it, and it's cool because you learn and you see things differently too. Like sometimes you notice things and notice ways that like I said with Paul Reiser's character being a dick. I mean, how big of a dick do you need to be than to lock in Sigourney Ripley's character and a child? And stick them in a locked room with two fucking face huggers because you're hoping the fact that one of them get impregnated so that you can bring it back to your corporation. I mean, like I said, the guy's just I mean, the whole time lying through his teeth, like, oh yeah, we're gonna destroy him, and it's like, oh wait, you can't destroy this. This is a multi-billion-dollar establishment. And they're like, yeah, let's see. Well, actually, since this is a military expedition, he outranks you. So now that what do you want to do? He's like, let's just blow this shit up. I'm like, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. He's like, who are you? Who are you to decide to genocide, a species? Well, I don't know if you just didn't pay attention, but this species is not something that anybody should take lightly. You know what I mean? It's one of those ones where, like, yes, I'm not saying, I'm a huge advocate for, for not extincting certain animals and things like that, with sharks going extinct and all this, elephants and all this thing that brings of extinction. Yeah, aliens that have blood that kill humans and incubate you and have nothing to do but destructive and want to destroy everything that really have no there's no real reason to have them in the ecosystem in general. They don't do anything particularly good for anything other than themselves. Yeah, I'm all up for extinction of those guys. So I'm with Ripley. I think you should just blow up that little area and say goodbye. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out because we got Aliens 3, and then you got that doesn't work out and it goes into the future and they clone her and Alien 4, and then you go back into the prequels. I like the prequels. I like the Prometheus and things like that. They tell you a little bit more of the story of how the xenomorphs got made, and the big thing in the first movie was the space jockey. So you got to find out a little bit more about them. So like I said, I've always been a fan of of just aliens and the Alien franchise to begin with. But yeah, like I said, I mean, all those other ones, yeah, there's definitely points that you can take away from different things, and some movies were better than others. But yeah, Aliens 2 has got to be like I said, it's just downright one of those movies where it's just it's not even like I said, not even the fact that it's a sequel. I just think it's one of the best movies in general just made ever. Period.
Absolutely, man, for sure, 100%. In fact, when I was out running some errands today, that also took me through like a hot topic. It was like the second time that I noticed like that alien shirt on the wall and stuff like that from the franchise, and I'm like, I still left it behind, but there's even a part of me that's like, you know what? Might need to detour back there on my way to get Mrs. Vamp from work, and might need that Alien t-shirt, like it's just such a solid franchise, man. But
Yeah.
Devil, why don't you take us right into the obituaries, my friend? I know that you're very high on this movie. I am too. We might have a little bit of debate, but we'll see how things go. But talk to us a little bit about Aliens as far as how you rank it on the obituaries.
I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm obviously gonna rank this high. I mean, I guess when we do these rankings, they're always out of 10. As far as horror, there's not too many horror movies that I could probably logistically give maybe a 10 out of 10, other than a couple of them. And some of them might be because of, personal reasons and things like that when it comes to that. There's not too many, especially in the horror genre. I mean, like I said, you could put Rocky Horror if you're considering that a horror. That's going to be at 10 out of 10. me and you are definitely always going to agree that Lost Boys, if we're going to rank that, it's going to be a 10 out of 10. We just, yeah, we can nitpick and there are things that we could probably say that we might not like about it. Wish they would have done this differently or wish they would have
Yeah.
done that differently. But we're still going to, our love for Lost Boys is going to be 10 out of 10. Near Dark is another one of those ones where, with Bill Paxton and Lance both being in that, I'm gonna give that movie a 10. I'm gonna give that movie a 10 out of 10 every time. So,
Right.
and like I said, with the aliens, I mean, when it comes to this kind of stuff like that, yeah, I mean, I would personally, I would love to give this a 10, but I'm not gonna give it that high of a rating. I think it's nearly a perfect movie. It's not a perfect movie. There definitely are some things that you can argue with and certain things and stuff like that in general, but I think it's as far as like, when it comes to like sequels and things like that, it's definitely up there. I mean, like I said, I mean, like when we were talking about with Terminator. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I think five is the greatest of all the Star Wars films, which technically I guess would be somewhat of a sequel, even though it's part five. But I don't know, however you want to say that. You know what I mean? So when it comes to things like that, yeah, I'm gonna give it love. I'm gonna give it praise and things like that. But when it comes to like this, like I said, I mean, pseudo horror genre. Like I said, Alien. Like I said, the first Alien's definitely more horror related, but even then, it's still very science fiction. It's definitely still in that science fiction thing. This one, like I said, it's such a multitude of different things. It's so much. It's such a like it's got so many genres mixed in together, but it still has that horror factor because it's still creepy. Those when the freaking people are on the wall, they're cocooned and stuff like that, and the one comes alive for a minute, and then the chest burner comes out. That still creeps the shit out of me. Like, seeing them crawling on the walls, like kind of, because they're camouflaged because the spaceship kind of looks like cartilage. It looks like their cartilage, so you really can't tell. It's creepy as shit. Them coming after you. So, yeah, it's still a fun movie. Like I said, it still gets me every time. And like I said, Bill Paxton's like I said, I mean, as much as you love him, we love him in all the movies. I honestly think this is the best role that he's ever. I mean, like I said, I love him near Dark. Obviously, I love him, and in Weird Science as Chet the brother, and we talked about Frailty, where he was in Frailty and all that. Twister. I mean, I'm always been a huge Bill Paxton.
Yeah, Mrs. Vamp loves Twister.
Yeah, but I honestly think this
Shout
is
out
the
to our buddy Sean Whalen on that one.
Yeah, yeah. So this is like my favorite role, I think, of his, just because it's just so much fun, and he just goes completely stupid in this whole time, and just the one-liners and everything he says. So for me, like I said, not a 10, even though in my heart, I would love to give it a 10, but I got to give it a little bit of room for maybe something in the future we talk about with 10s, but I'm definitely going to put it up there as probably a higher mark. So I'm going to go with a 9.5. No, just
Oh
kidding.
man,
Just
Devil.
kidding. 9.0. We're gonna go 9.0. I could go 9.5. I was only kidding when I was doing 9. But I'm definitely gonna give it a 9, I was like, I'm gonna say 9.5 and see what he says about that, but I was only
Nope.
he was like, oh shit. Nah. Like I
No,
said, as much as I love to give it a 9.5 or a 10, I'm gonna reasonably give it that 9.0. I think 9.0 is exactly where I would stamp this.
no, I get you, brother, and I respect you, and I love you, and I understand where you're coming from, and you're gonna end up because with that mark, you're gonna end up getting the victory today. I don't see it there, but that's not because I'm fighting for another movie. It's stylistically when it comes to movies that I love and the way I see things and how I connect with things. So I see this movie at an 8, gives it an 8.5 collectively, which is still going to give victory to the devil on this one. But there are strong things though about this movie that even if we agreed on the two movies being a tie, that may or may not have swung the needle depending on how we did the debate. One of the things that was going to play incredibly heavy in a positive victory for Aliens is actually what I said 2 minutes ago. it's a very strong rewatchability factor in this movie. That does not, when it comes to Conjuring 2, I do not play a factor into that actually. I can watch the Conjuring movies, those type of movies, all the time on repeat. I love those movies. I love the stylistic design of paranormal movies. There are exceptions to that. While I did enjoy Paranormal Activity like a lot of people did, as the franchise continued, it got just ridiculously stupid. It just wasn't good. But other paranormal movies, Exorcist, Conjuring, me personally, Annabelle, Nun, La Llorona, I love the Insidious movies. Mrs. Vamp, not so much. She thinks those things are stupid as hell. I know you think they're stupid as hell. I enjoy them. I enjoy that paranormal aspect. I can watch them all the time. However, though, those type of movies do come with a disadvantage because once you've seen movies like that, see where the scares are, see how the paranormal is designed, I do feel that the common populace of horror fans would struggle to watch some of those movies on a regularity. Where with Aliens, it does have the advantage of, well, do I classify it a horror movie? No, technically I don't. If I'm really being honest, it's a science fiction action movie for me. But Alien is 100% a horror movie. Um, but it is the franchise. It's a direct sequel. It plays its cards correctly, and I love the way it's written. They did not phone it in. They didn't just go for a cash grab. I really think that James looked at this and was like, I would like to do a movie based off this. You know, of course, with Ridley Scott doing the original. I love the fact that James did not treat this as a cash grab. I'm sure he knew that with proper care, he was going to get paid doing this movie regardless. But I love the fact that he did not treat it as a payday. He treated it as his own vision based off the respect of the original, and it also worked out as a payday. Um, so while I do think that Conjuring 2 is a stronger overall movie and sticks a little closer to the criteria, which is why the reason I do give Aliens an 8, that is how I feel about it, a 9 for yourself and an 8.5 collectively. You can't take away with just what I spoke of at the beginning. This movie is considered the gold standard. And I don't feel it correct to be, it's the gold standard, but it needs to be ranked down here. No, that's not correct. That's not the way we do things, and that's not the way I feel it should be done. But yeah, man, so I do think this movie is got so many strong aspects to the way that they designed it as a sequel. More aliens, more action, where I love Alien, but the story itself, it's not a slow burn, but it's a power walk, you know? Because it needed to take time in certain places to get to where it was going. Dude, Aliens just dials it in, man, and just kind of throws it, and it just keeps it going the whole time. And again, I love the fact that they have this sad situation to tie it in with Ripley's character, to allow for it to blossom with the, the invitation or the introduction of this character, where Newt is a mute who then becomes, because of what she's had to go through and the scars of that situation, to what it is. But anyway, let me get off my soapbox when it comes to this. But overall, I think this was an incredibly strong showdown, Devil. I think this was a good one. I think we're leaving the Fangs and Infernos with a lot to talk about and a lot to look into for themselves personally with how they view movies. So I do feel that Conjuring 2 has an overall stronger movie ability to it. The consistency, the design, and the execution of Aliens is just too much to ignore when it comes to that. So with your blessing, man, I think 8.5 meeting in the middle is proper when it comes to this movie, if you're down for it, which still gives, of course, victory to the Devil in our sequel to stronger sequels.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Like you said, it's one of those ones where it's like, it's different strokes for different folks, you know what I
Yep.
mean? And like I said, I mean it, like I said, when it comes to the horror genre, yeah, like I said, it may not be considered a horror genre, but we didn't specify it needed to be horror. It's
Yep.
the sequels. And therefore, like you said, it's considered one of the gold standards of being that. Not saying that, that Conjuring 2 may not, you know, right now it's a fairly new, movie, franchise in general. I mean, it's been around for a little bit, but not nearly as long as Aliens. So I feel like maybe, years later, Conjuring 2 might be in that status of that,
Yeah.
bigger. But I mean, as of right now, if you go and ask people what, favorite, sequels to movies, yeah, you may get some Conjuring twos, but I can guarantee you're gonna get a lot more Aliens because people will just know
Absolutely.
that. Like I said, maybe 20 years, 20, 30 years down the line, maybe that Conjuring might get that little bit of like spark up and people be in conversations. We'll definitely see. But yeah, Aliens is definitely one of those ones where it's like it shapes the world how it's supposed to be, and gives us that love of face huggers and xenomorphs.
Absolutely, Devil, my friend. And it's funny because if we were to do Alien, and I'm talking specifically about the four aliens, if we were to do something like Alien versus Conjuring as franchises, knowing that we don't have the fourth movie quite yet. I'm just asking people to suspend disbelief. In a speed version, I do feel like there is that potential for you, my friend, to get a little bit of the vampire treatment because there is a solid consistency currently to the Conjuring franchise. And while Alien, fantastic, Aliens, elite, Alien 3, subjective, um, Resurrection with that devastating word does have the potential to be your Witchboard 3, or your Warlock 3. So there is a little bit of that, like, possibility
Yeah.
if we were to do a franchise thing, but that's a conversation for another day. So Fangs and Infernos, that is the way it shall be, and forever it will be etched in stones as a victory for the devil to even up our better sequels at 1-1 as he makes a comeback on this one as his beloved Aliens does banish back to hell, whether he likes it or not, the demons of Conjuring 2. But yes, Devil does take this one as Aliens with an 8.5 takes out Conjuring 2 at an 8.0. But we talked about demons. We talked a lot about possession. We spoke about witch boards. On that note, Devil and I would like for you to invite you to check out our friends at Twisted Vines who have made amazing homemade Ouija boards for Vampire and Devil podcast, the only two in existence, courtesy of Twisted Vines, do belong to myself and to the devil. But they do amazing Ouija board work as well as awesome other home decor, creepy decor, especially getting into that vampy season. We may be in Summerween now, but we're getting closer to Halloween. But then, of course, we want to give our love out to our friend Chris at the Buffalo Bill House Bed and Breakfast. If you guys are going to get up to Perryopolis, make sure that you're taking the opportunity to stay in the actual house from Silence of the Lambs. They're partners with us as well. And when it comes to amazing things to look at, since we're on a Ouija board topic, we have to mention our friend John, who does own, of course, the Salem Witchboard Museum, the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. Anything you want to know about Ouija boards, John Kozik is the man. And of course, when you need to look fashionably creepy and amazingly awesome, especially with that devilish face of that black and red profile, check out our friends, our ever so beloveds at rockandhorror.com. That is exactly where you go. That is the only place to go to get official Vampire and Devil merchandise for the podcast. T-shirts, tanks, hoodies, and hats. It is the way. It is the way to look good. It is the way to maybe bring over some of those beautiful demons that you might want to talk to. But thank you so much, Fangs and Infernos. We love you guys to death. But again, victory to the devil on better sequels. Horns up. Fangs out. Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. All right, Fangs and Infernos, let's discuss another coffin nails. How do you feel about gambling? Are you a winner? Are you a loser? Or are you a little too afraid to try? Let's take a trip to Vegas as we discuss 2009's Vampires in Vegas with our late great Tony Todd. He plays Sylvian, who's basically part of a vampire clan before he strikes out on his own. In the storyboard of this particular movie, that's how vampires traveled. That's what kept them strong, was always having, their brethren around them, protecting them, looking out for them. But Sylvian has since struck out on his own. He moves to Vegas because there's so much just sex and violence and money and drinking and everything, of course, associated with Vegas as far as the good and the bad and the evil. So he finds that to be a good home base. He hires a scientist basically trying to conduct a cure. Find him a cure sort of in the ballpark of like blades, some kind of like serum, something that he can take that will allow him to not be affected by the sun and things like that. Overall, basically all the parts of vampiric lore that I'm always like harping about. But his main henchman is played by Rocky DeMarco, who's been in all kinds of various movies over her career. She's absolutely fantastic. And so it was very cool to see her pop up in this movie. This movie's fun. It's a good time. It's kind of what you would expect from like a vampire or just kind of like horror movie in Vegas. It kind of has that feel. It's got a little bit of camp to it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Leprechaun 3, which took place in Vegas. But overall, basically, as this cure is trying to be made, it also unleashes kind of a scourge of like vampires on Las Vegas to take out partygoers and all kinds of young people alike, where one of the partygoers, ends up developing some powers of his own and ends up flipping the script to take down Sylvian. Does he do that? Might have to let you find out for your own, because I don't know if we want to talk too much a little bit about what may or may not have happened to our beloved Tony Todd. But the movie's fun, it's cool, it's nothing crazy, it's nothing over the top, but it's got a little bit of enjoyment to it. It's not going to get a high score, but it's going to get a decent one, and I'm going to give this one a 6.0 on my coffin nails for the obituaries. Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got John Waters, but what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And we love it. We love the fact that, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out, because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is Facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bizarre Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.